WXOS HD1 East St. Louis. 101 ESPN is driven by Auto Centers Nissan, home of the lifetime warranty and 30-day return. We're right back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Brad, you can't pitch any better than he has. Yeah, so far, so good for Michael McGreevy. 10 innings, only giving up 1 run. His second start, as you mentioned, Chip, first on the road. And a swing and a miss. How about that first inning for Michael McGreevy? As McGreevy has his second strikeout, he's matching Feltner pitch for pitch. 2 outs.
But for the most part, he hasn't been nibbling, and he's been living down there. 93 on the corner to get the strikeout of McMahon. That's number 4 there for Michael McGreevy.
It was fun to watch, man. I thought McGreevy did a really nice job. He's got some poise. Nothing speeds him up out there. He's just under control. Even that, I mean, as frustrating as it is, that ground ball that leads to a run on the third baseline, he's smiling about it. Like, I'm not going to do it. I made my pitch. Didn't go my way, and just goes after the next guy. Like, I like what we saw out of him today. I really did. So, positive outing for him. Navigated that lineup really well first time through. All outs recorded were punch outs and on the ground, which is what he does.
That voice you just heard was Oliver Marmol, the Cardinals manager last night, coming off of a win. Cardinals win 7-3 on the road at Colorado. Michael McGreevy, the story of the game. 5 innings pitched, 4 hits allowed, 3 earned runs. Really, it was even better than the bottom line indicates. It was that last inning that ultimately got him. Alex, I was very impressed by what we saw last night from Michael McGreevy. He is a guy to me that I had been saying for probably about a month now. Why not get him opportunities at the big league level? He looked so good against Texas, and I know not every start that he has at the big league level is going to be as impressive as what we saw then. He is a guy that pitches to contact. Now, he has more swing and miss than I think we were led to believe. He had 5 strikeouts in that game last night. If you're getting close to a strikeout per inning, that works at this level, man. Mm-hmm. I think his stuff plays a little better than what the Cardinals suggested to us. I also think this might have been one of those scenarios where Michael McGreevy learned what his stuff can do at this level, and it gave him confidence. Because for most of the season, he wasn't that impressive down at the minor league level. Up until, like, I think mid-June, he was just okay. Just okay. Nothing more, nothing less. He gets that start at the big league level, and then since going back down to AAA, 10 starts, 58 innings, a 2.8 ERA. Looked pretty damn dominant for the type of pitcher that he is. Now in 3 big league appearances, Alex, 4 earned runs, 15 innings. Can't do a whole lot better than that. What have you seen from Michael McGreevy? What does it do for your confidence in him heading into the 2025 season?
I've been impressed. I mean, from what Ollie said in terms of how he just seems to always attack, even when things don't go his way, he still goes after the next hitter. You're talking about some really good strikeout numbers that I didn't think he had when you're talking about the previous appearance against Pittsburgh where he came out of the bullpen and gave you 4 strikeouts, and then this one 5 through 5. I mean, this is a guy, to me, that has already earned the opportunity to be in the rotation next year. Now, of course, you're going to have to do the competition, but what the Cardinals don't need to do this offseason is go out and spend $24 million on 2 guys who can go out and provide them innings. I think you've got 2 guys that can do that now for you, like Michael McGreevy through 2 starts. And again, it wasn't the prettiest against Colorado. I thought he did a really good job. I think you probably can go out there one more inning and give him a quality start with 6 innings and 3 earned runs given up. But I think with what you've seen from Palante this year and from Michael McGreevy this year in the 2 starts and then 1 out of the bullpen and what he's done in the minors, I mean, these are guys that you fill the back end of your rotation with, that you go for upside, because Palante has shown you that upside. He's been one of your best pitchers since the All-Star break. McGreevy, in 2 starts, has shown you what the upside looks like. Now it's just a matter of giving a little bit of leash, and what the Cardinals don't and shouldn't have to worry about next season. Oh, well, we got to compete for the Central Division crown, and we got to go for a playoff spot. No, man, right now what you need to do is develop talent, and I think you've got 2 guys, including Michael McGreevy, who have the same amount of talent that you tried to throw out there consistently with Miles Michaelis, Kyle Gibson, and Lance Lynn this season.
You know who he kind of reminds me of? Now, this is not a homegrown player, so it is a bit different, but just in terms of what he's going to be potentially capable of with the Cardinals, like a Kyle Loesch type. He gets in here. Yeah. Just like eats innings for you, is a really solid mid to back end of the rotation starter. And you go into every season, you're like, yeah, we got Kyle Loesch. feel pretty good about it. That's not going to be the reason you win the World Series or anything, but you need guys like that in your rotation. And I think sometimes we underestimate just how important that is. You mentioned the value that he brings to the table. That, to me, is something that this Cardinals team, I hope, has learned their lesson about, is just how valuable it is to have back into the rotation starters that are homegrown. Man, think about if they could use the $25 million that they have been spending on back end of the rotation starters on other things. Like just, hey, instead of going out and getting Steven Matz and Lance Lynn, what if we were able to go get a $25 million position player this offseason?
Right.
Like, hey, what if instead of getting those two starters that I just mentioned, they had Cody Bellinger? Something like that, right? Or what if instead of getting those two guys, they had
Juan Soto? Hell yeah.
Okay, let's relax.
Oh.
Jock Peterson and a closer that they can get on the market for $12 million, which would allow them to then trade Ryan Helsley, for example. Those are the kinds of things that become possible when you don't have to pay for the back end of your rotation. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Somebody from the 314 said, call Money McGreevy, guys. I actually think he could be better than Sonny Gray. Put this guy into the rotation.
Okay, that had to have been sarcasm.
Let's reel it in a little bit.
That was sarcasm.
Reel it in just
We
a
all
little
understand. Sometimes sarcasm is funny. That one wasn't.
I like Michael McGreevy. I think he's going to be a good starter for the Cardinals. I think he's like a 4 or 5. That's okay. Nothing wrong with that. If you've got him and Palante manning the 4th and 5th spot in your rotation, you could be a pretty decent team. Now, I do have some questions, Alex, going into next season, if that's the way they decide to do it, how they will hold up over the course of an entire season. But guess what? That's what this is all about. Let's learn. Let's learn what they can do. Can they get you 170 innings or 150 innings plus apiece? I don't know. It's time to find out, though, because if it's not them, maybe it ends up becoming Gordon Graceffo. Maybe Quinn Matthews is available for you at midway through next season. Maybe Sam Robersa takes a big step for you. Maybe Tink Hintz is finally healthy and he becomes somebody that's an option for you in the second half of the season. There's a lot of different outs for this team going into next year. I think Michael McGreevy is the guy right now, though, that deserves that first opportunity. They needed to develop some homegrown back into the rotation starters. It appears with him and with Palante, they've at least found 2 of them thus far.
Well, and it depends on what this offseason is going to look like, because if the Cardinals are going to be slashing some of the finances, then we might be talking about getting rid of a guy like Miles Mikolas or an Eric Fetty. I don't think they get rid of Sonny Gray. But going into next season, my assumption is it's going to be Miles Mikolas, Sonny Gray, and probably Kyle Gibson. I am A-okay with if those are the 3 guys. Now, look, I'm hoping for more upside, but I think that's where you're hoping the development of Quinn Matthews comes through by the end of next season. I am A-okay, though, if my 4 and 5 are going to be rolling out there as Andre Palante and Michael McGreevy. Because this season, the 4 and 5 that I was rolling out there was Steven Matz and Lance Lynn. And we also, now look, Lance Lynn, it was a good season for him, but you knew what to expect. Steven Matz, I knew the injury was going to happen. These 2 guys, even though I know Palante's pitched well for about like 15 games for you, it's still a question mark of who he's going to be. Michael McGreevy, that is a massive question mark. But this team should be all about the question marks right now and figuring out how do we get from where we have been these last 2 years of being an average team to going to the next level. And you do that by developing young, cost-controlled pitching.
Yeah, it's time to get answers. You have a lot of questions. Let's get some answers on some of these players that you've had in your system for a number of years now. This is a former first-round pick. Let's see what he's got. It might not be great. It might end up being, hey, this is a mirage, and we've only seen 3 appearances from him at the big league level. And as teams get more of a scouting report on him, find out how his stuff plays up at this level, maybe they do start to figure him out. Okay, at least then I have that information to be able to take into account and say, okay, how does he now adjust to the league? What does that look like for him? Palante had some of that, where he came in, it looked really good for a time, and then he had to make adjustments. He did make those adjustments. Now he's back into the good graces of the team, back into the rotation. Let's find out what that looks like with Michael McGreevy. The other thing, Alex, this to me, Michael McGreevy and what we've seen from him, again, it's 3 appearances, but it is what it is. It means that the Cardinals need to find a way to move off of the money from Miles Mikolas this offseason. I don't know how you do that. I don't know if that means that they have to eat $8 million to make him a $10 million pitcher for another team. Teams are willing to take on that kind of a guy for that amount of money, eat innings, back into the rotation starter. A lot of teams need that guy right now. Hell, the Dodgers would probably love to have a Miles Mikolas as their number 5 starter.
They'd turn him into a number 1.
I just want to see what this looks like. Right now, that roster spot, that spot in the rotation is more valuable than what Miles Mikolas is bringing to the table. There's just no upside there. At least there's a little bit of upside with Michael McGreevy.
And if you're going to bring back Kyle Gibson, which I fully expect them to, that's a guy that posts for you. And like Miles Mikolas' role this season was to post. I think they probably view this as, well, we brought in Fetty. Fetty could be what we thought Mikolas was going to be as the Robin to our Batman.
And he's $7 million.
Yeah, and now we've got a guy who can post 20 starts for us in Kyle Gibson, and we've got the young players. Your rotation could be potentially set depending on what this offseason looks like.
Last thing that I wanted to get to from last night's game. Good performance by the bullpen once again. John King, Andrew Kittredge, Matthew Liberatore, Ryan Fernandez went 4 innings, gave up 0 earned runs in that one. Ended up striking out 5, did not allow a walk. Overall good performance by your bullpen. They did not have Ryan Helsley in that game last night. They did not have to throw him because it was not a save situation. Ryan Fernandez was the one that he didn't have a closing situation, but he did finish the game, got the final out. Alex, how would you feel if next year you went into the season with Ryan Fernandez as your designated closer going into the season?
I'd be fine with it as long as we're all on the same page of what the expectation is next year. Like if somebody out there is expecting this team to actually like compete again in the Central, then if you lose Ryan Helsley, I don't think you can do that. But to me, this team takes a step backwards, and I think this team would be better off having Ryan Fernandez or some type of committee as a closer out of your bullpen if you trade away Ryan Helsley to bring in assets that make you better for the long term. Because Ryan Helsley makes you good next year. I don't know if anybody believes this is a World Series contender next year. I think the more important thing for the Cardinals is let's make sure we're good for the long-term future. And you may not have to rely on your bullpen the way you did this year if you can go out there and find some offensive assets to make your team better. So I'd be okay with it.
Would you rather trade Ryan Helsley or extend Ryan Helsley?
Trade. I'm not extending Ryan Helsley because I don't think my winning window is going to be in the time frame that he is at his best.
If it's a 4-year, $60 million deal.
No way. No way. I mean, I don't know if this team's going to be competing to win anything unless they make some type of significant changes in 3 to 4 years.
And I think he has to be one of the guys that's involved. I keep hearing the morning show talking about Ryan Helsley being attached to Miles Mikolas to be able to move his money. If that's the move, then I don't want to trade Ryan Helsley. I have no interest in doing that. Don't just move him to be able to move bad money from your books. The money is what it is. It's a sunk cost at this point. If you're going to try to get rid of a Miles Mikolas or a Steven Matz contract, eat some of it. Just go ahead and pay some of it down. Do not use one of your best trade assets to be able to go out and move that money around. If you want to move Ryan Helsley, it's to get the best return possible during the offseason or to do that same thing next year at the trade deadline. That's why you move Helsley, is to get better as an organization, not to move off of bad money that you want to get rid of.
The dude is going to set a franchise record in terms of saves in a single season for the Cardinals. He's going to surpass Trevor Rosenthal's season, if I'm correct on that.
Yes, very close.
You don't attach that player to trade bad money away. You trade that player to bring in really good assets, young players, to stockpile your system.
I don't know who the team is, but if there is a team out there that is looking for major league ready players, that wants to contend, but right now they need more position players and they're looking for quantity plus quality for a big time star, right? I don't know who that team is going to be this offseason. I don't know what teams are planning to do, but the Cardinals have a really good package to offer if they were willing to give up like Ivan Herrera, Lars Nootbaar, Tink Hintz, Victor Scott, Ryan Helsley, Nolan Gorman, Thomas Ajayci. Like 4 of those 7 guys can get you a star if you wanted to trade them elsewhere. Maybe it's different deals. Maybe you trade 4 of those guys that I just mentioned in one deal, Ryan Helsley in another, to be able to kind of restock what you have down in the farm system. They've got pieces. Now it's about going out there and getting the star that they're lacking right now for the lineup. You know what helps with not having the same closer that you want or that you have right now? Winning games 7-2. Not having to go to your closer as often because you're able to blow the game wide open because you have a better offense. That's something that is on the table for the Cardinals going into this offseason. I'll be curious to see how they end up going about that. One option for them going into next year is to have a guy like a Ryan Fernandez as your internal option as the closer. I would be more than fine with it. I do think it's something this team needs to explore in the offseason. With Alex Ferrario and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. T-Bone out one more day. It feels like he probably will be back in with us tomorrow. We'll see. Worst case scenario, he'll be back in with us us on Friday. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we're going to talk to Chris Kerber. He's the voice of the Blues. You guys can get involved with us. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. You can always check us out on YouTube as well. YouTube.com/101ESPN STL. But coming up next, Alex, Jamie said something yesterday on the Fast Lane that I found to be really interesting. Who is the player that if he takes a step, the Blues will end up in the playoffs as a result? I'll tell you what he had to say to that question. I want to hear Alex's response to that coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
It's time for a DraftKings at Casino Queen Redbird report on 101 ESPN.
Brooke Grimsley here for your Redbird report. The Cardinals rallied, scoring 4 runs in the 8th inning to beat the Rockies 7-3 in the series opener last night. In the 8th inning, the Cardinals broke a 3-3 tie after Jordan Walker, Victor Scott II, and Mason Wynn had back-to-back run-scoring hits. Wynn earlier hit a 2-run homer and finished with a career-high 4 RBIs. Lars Nootbaar scored twice in the game. In 5 innings of work, Michael McGreevy allowed 3 runs on 4 hits in the second start and his 3rd appearance of his career. Eric Fetty will get the start tonight. First pitch is at 7:40.
The Redbird Report is presented by DraftKings at Casino Queen. Play, stay, dine at DraftKings at Casino Queen.
This is Ron from Swiss Air Heating and Cooling. For the last 35 years, I've been known as the Wizard of Comfort. With the super hot days winding down, our savings are ramping up. Now is the time to replace your old and inefficient heating and cooling system. You can get up to $2,500 in instant rebates on a Daikin system plus 0% financing. Act now and I'll include a 12-year parts and labor warranty. That's 12 years of worry-free operation. $2,500 in instant rebates, 0% financing, and a 12-year parts and labor warranty. Find us online at SwissAirSTL.com.
101 ESPN is your home for Blues hockey. And every month during the season, you can register to score a pair of tickets to an upcoming Blues game at Enterprise Center. New winners are picked every month throughout the season. Enter to win free Blues tickets now at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app. This is exactly where you want to be, listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
With Alex Ferrario and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex, yesterday I was listening to the Fast Lane. They did what I thought was a really interesting segment. The Blues will make the playoffs if blank takes the next step this season. They were talking about individual players, who would you go with, and some of the nominees from the guys, the hockey guys on the show, of course. Jake Neighbors was one. Robert Thomas was another one that they went with. Braden Shin was a third. And then Jamie went, the non-hockey guy. And here's what he had to say. The Blues will make the playoffs if blank takes a big step this season. Let's hear what Jamie had to say.
I think if Philip Broberg takes the next steps, following what he did in the Stanley Cup playoffs and following what he did during the season, that could be a huge difference for the Blues. If you could put out 2 pairings back-to-back that are basically shutdown pairs, That's going to limit the offensive abilities for the other team. It's going to lessen the time in your own zone, take the workload off your goalies, make it easier for the forwards as they're getting clean passes up the ice. So for me, my guy in all of this, and I know most Blues fans haven't really dove into watching Philip Broberg yet, if he takes the next steps and becomes a true top four defenseman, that will be a big difference.
That's my answer. I don't even think there's a close second, personally. I think Jamie hit it on the head. That is exactly what the Blues have been needing. Alex, how many different guys have we been talking about over the past 5 years as, hey, could they go and make a play for Mackenzie Weegar? Could they go trade for Jacob Chychrun? Do you go to the free agency market and get one of Alex's favorite Mongoons? I think we've done 20 different Ferrario 5s over the past 3 years on
a lot of them.
Players that could help the Blues in their top four. And now you look at it and it's like, oh, so they've got this guy that's like 23 years old and just played in the Western Conference Finals and the Stanley Cup Final and acquitted himself quite well for a team that had a real shot to win the Cup last year. And now you just plop that into your blue line and he's got a chance to be, if not a top pair defenseman, a top four defenseman. That changes everything about the way that I view this team, not only for this season, but for the future. And I don't want to put too many expectations on him. I'm not saying, hey, you've got the reincarnation of Jay Bouwmeester here, but maybe.
Well, somebody said that on this show.
I think he is the guy to me that unlocks the potential of what this season can be. Do you agree with Jamie? Would he be your nomination for this?
He would not be, but he would be like tied for first in this one. I love the idea of Broberg taking the next step. My guy would be Jake Neighbors, though. I do agree with Broberg because Broberg gives you a shutdown pair defenseman. And I mean, Drew Bannister is even floating the idea out there of potentially Broberg and Parayko playing together because then Leddy and Falk can play together and you've got two guys who can play that shutdown role.
Love that.
I mean, that would be impressive. And that's like what we've been talking about for the longest time. Here's my only thing on it. Goaltender had to be superb last season for you to be even close to the playoffs. If your defense improves, obviously you're going to be there. But the reason Jake Neighbors is my guy is your offense has to take a step forward if you want to be a playoff team. Like, you can't be this Ken Hitchcock 2013 squad that's going to average giving up 1 or 2 goals per game and be the playoff team. I just don't think that's going to work in the Central Division. And I think the next step for Jake Neighbors is 30 to 35 goals and 50-plus points. And if I'm getting one of those on top of already Kyrou, who people believe 30 to 35 goals, Thomas, who could be 30 and 100 points, Pavel Buchnevich, if they move him to wing, 30 to 35 goals. Now you're telling me I got another guy who, if he takes the step forward, is a 30-goal scorer. I mean, that's 4 dudes. That's 2 lines that have the potential of putting up a ton of goals. Your power play is significantly better if Jake Neighbors takes the next step. So as much as I agree, Broberg is like 1B to my 1A of taking that step forward. I think because this team lacked offense so much last year, you got to have somebody else take that step forward offensively, and that's Neighbors for me.
It's interesting you bring up Jake Neighbors because listening to the Spit and Chicklets podcast, they had Doug Armstrong on, and he was talking about a lot of different things. Talked a little bit about Drew Bannister, talked about the offseason, the offer sheets. I told a really great story about like the timing of the offer sheets when it was sent to Edmonton and how he was on a golf outing at the time.
Roommates with Ken Holland. It was incredible.
So we got to see Ken Holland's reaction to Edmonton being thrust into absolute chaos by Doug Armstrong, which is just fantastic. But he was asked about Jake Neighbors. He had an interesting comparison. I want to get your thoughts on this, Alex. The player that he compared Jake Neighbors to is another one that he had a lot of experience with down in Dallas.
He reminds me a lot of a guy I had the privilege to work with in Dallas, Brendan Morrow. Fights for the team, fights for the right reasons, scores goals, plays hard. Everybody wants to be around him, and he's got quiet, strong leadership qualities. And you know, again, getting back to how this started, you add Broberg and Holloway to him and some of these other guys, Kyrou, Thomas. We're just trying to build a team, and he's a massive part of that. And I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of Jake's on end off the ice.
If you look at the numbers of what Brendan Morrow, he was drafted 25th overall, Jake Neighbors 26th overall. Like, Morrow was putting up a ton of offense in junior hockey compared to what Jake Neighbors was in junior hockey. But like, I see it. I see exactly what Doug Armstrong's talking about. Like, Brendan Morrow was a former captain of the Dallas Stars, never won a Stanley Cup with the Dallas Stars, but was consistently a 20 to 25 goal scorer. He was putting up 50 points. Dude would fight just as much as he would stand in front of the net and score goals. Hit everything. And he was traded or signed multiple times by teams that were looking for leadership qualities. Like, don't overlook what Doug Armstrong's talking about Jake Neighbors, because I think Neighbors could be one of those dudes that I think JR's bold prediction was he gets an 8-year contract extension this year. I think Jake Neighbors is going to be one of those mainstays of this Blues team moving forward. And I mean, you're talking about a guy who's got leadership qualities. So if you're telling me that his career could be Brendan Morrow's, to me, that is a massive success for a guy who was selected 26th overall.
So I think he was comparing him, again, as much off the ice as he was on the ice. So it's worth noting that. I think this was about, hey, here's who they are as people. Here's who they are as players. There are a lot of similarities between the two. But for those that have not looked into Brendan Morrow's numbers, like you said, consistent 25-ish goal scorer, right around 50 points kind of on average for his NHL career. Alex, if that's what the Blues ended up getting out of Jake Neighbors, that's lower than some of what we've been talking about this offseason, but it is in line with what I've been saying. Not to say that I'm right, you're wrong, or anything like that, but that's kind of more in line with my current expectation level for Jake Neighbors as a player. How would you feel if that ends up being what he is? 25 goals on average, 45 to 50 points every single season. How do you feel about that as a Neighbors level of expectation?
I would call that a success. Now, I think, like, Brendan Morrow's best year was 32 goals and 74 points. He only did it once. I think he scored 30 another time with Dallas. Yep. I view Neighbors as more of a consistent 30-goal scorer in the prime of his career. But, man, if you're telling me that those are the numbers for Brendan Morrow, or for Jake Neighbors like Brendan Morrow, that's a win in my book, because I think a lot of people that saw Jake Neighbors get drafted 26th overall, at least the scout experts, looked at that as, that's great. He's probably a middle six forward who could chip in every once in a while, but he's never going to set the world on fire. And I mean, if you're telling me I can have 25 goals and 50 points every single season, man, mark me down for that, because that's a top 6 winger in the National Hockey League. And for the style that he plays, I think is the more important factor.
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. I'd sign up for that today. Like, if you told me, hey, you can hit a button and you can lock it in, he's going to be, on average, over the next 10 years, let's say, he's going to score 240 goals and put up close to 500 points. Like, I'd do it. I'd sign up for that.
Yep.
I will take that right now. Where can I sign the dotted line? There will be seasons where he's better. Maybe this season he gets 30 because he's playing a little bit more. Maybe as the Blues get better and you have guys maybe that push him down a little bit in the lineup. That's not a bad thing. That means you've got more top 6 wingers that are slightly more talented than Jake Neighbors. Again, not a bad thing. And maybe then he gets closer to the 20 to 25 goals. You get into the playoffs, though. How many times have we seen it? You need guys like Jake Neighbors to come through, because the game tightens up. Things get a little bit more difficult. You need somebody that's willing to sacrifice their body at the front of the net to go score those dirty goals in the postseason. And that's where I think Jake Neighbors is really going to shine. Yeah. He's not just a guy that comes through during the regular season when things are a little bit more free-flowing. He's somebody you can count on when the games get the most difficult into postseason contention. Yeah. And that's where I think the Morrow comparison also comes through.
Well, and the other comp that has been on Jake Neighbors, I think Armstrong has used it, is Braden Shen. And I mean, again, look at Braden Shen's numbers: 20 to 25 goals, and he's getting you 50 to 60 points every single season. 26th overall pick, I would take that in a heartbeat.
He's a really good player, man. A really, really, really good player. Morrow, in his Dallas career in the postseason, 17 goals, 25 assists for 42 points, was a +4 on the ice, averaged about 20 minutes per game in 78 playoff games. Yeah. Telling me a guy that puts up like a 20 goal pace over the postseason? Yeah. I'll take that.
Yeah.
I'll sign up for
That's
that.
how you win.
Coming up in about 15 minutes, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. Coming up next, though, we're going to talk to Chris Kerber. He's the voice of the Blues here on 101 ESPN.
St. Louis Blues hockey can be heard exclusively on 101 ESPN. Get the info you need before and after every Blues game with a First Community pre- and post-game show.
First Community Credit Union, calling St. Louis home for 90 years and powered by Scott Lee Heating Company.
right, it's a Wednesday morning. Let's talk some turkey. Well, actually, no, let's not talk turkey. Let's talk about how comfortable your house is when you have your whole family over when you're cooking turkey for Thanksgiving, which is coming up in a little bit. You know, we're getting into that window where you start going from the air conditioning to letting the fall air in to eventually putting that heater on. You want to make sure that HVAC unit, that furnace is running well. If you have been noticing over the last little while, over the last couple of years, it might be time to replace your furnace. Now is the time to call Classic Air Care and do it. New government regulations are going to cause the price of units to go up. It has to deal with the Freon and the parts that are inside of it. But when that happens, you can expect prices to go up anywhere from 10 to 15%. Classic Air Care can get you done now. They can get you done before those new regulations kick in, and you're going to be fine. They want to save you money. Get on the docket early and make sure that if you are in the mode of thinking you need to replace your furnace, you're looking and doing it now so you can save money. That's how they want to help you. Call Classic Air Care, or you can visit them online. Book an appointment at classicaircare.com.
This Sunday, it's an NFL Sunday triple-header. Game 1, Buccaneers and Eagles. Game 2, 49ers and Patriots. Game 3, Ravens and Bills. Coverage starts Sunday morning at 11. Your destination for the NFL in St. Louis is 101 ESPN. 101 ESPN Sports Center.
Cards clobber Rockies to begin final road trip. Good morning. I'm Bradford Bruns with your Sports Center update powered by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Last night, Mason Wynn's big bang came early, but his two-run double in inning 8 helped secure a 7-3 victory for St. Louis. The Cardinal shortstop cracks that 15th homer, delivers 4 ribbies against Colorado. Number 0 now has 151 hits across 567 ABs. Contest 2 once again unfolds at 7:40 this evening. Eric Fetty battles ex-Redbird Austin Gomber. About 90 minutes beforehand, Drew Bannister's Blues will visit Columbus. STL dropped 2 straight weekend preseason affairs versus Dallas and Utah, respectively. Alex Ferrario pilots our pregame coverage after an abridged fast lane. This Sports Center update was brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
They are St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield Studio on 101 ESPN.
Abridged, piloting the pregame show.
God, I'm telling you,
Cardinals clobbered the Rockies.
What an
update.
When I listen to Bradford, it makes me like jot down in a notebook, like, okay, I'm going to write these 3 words down. 1, I'm going to go look them up. But 2, I'm going to figure out how to use these in a sentence today.
Bradford, true or false? And I don't want any further explanation, just a true or false.
This is going to be hard.
You have a word of the day calendar at home.
No comment?
True or false?
True.
Yes! I'm going to go home to my wife.
I would have been so disappointed if the answer was false.
I'm going to go home to my wife today and be like, honey, I particularly appreciate how you pilot this house when I'm not here.
Make sure you enunciate accordingly, too, and you've got it.
Yeah, really pop those P's.
Yeah, oh, totally. That's what the mic buff's for.
He's
Love
Alex
this guy.
Ferrario. That is Bradford Bruns in for Tanner Hendrickson today. We do have Chris Kerber. He's the voice of the Blues. He's joining us via the 101 ESPN hotline. Curbs, appreciate the time as always, man. How you doing today?
Fellas, I'm good. How are you?
We're doing fantastic, Curb. So let's start out with the conversation that we just had in our previous segment, started by the Fast Lane yesterday. I want to get your thoughts on this. They said the Blues will make the playoffs if blank, insert player here, takes the next step in their development. Who is that player for you? The Blues make the playoffs if blank takes the next step.
Robert Thomas.
And why is that, Curbs?
Well, I look at the amount of ice time that he got last year. His face-off numbers still stay pretty good. He's going to be the guy that things are going to go through. I look at him in this next role like the way maybe 5 years ago we were looking at Ryan O'Reilly. I think if Robert Thomas takes the next step in his development, which to me is easily in the conversation, or to me is he gets himself into the conversation where we're talking a top 5 candidate for the Selke Trophy, that's going to bode well for the St. Louis Blues. He's going to get the minutes. He's going to get the ice time. He's going to get the special teams time. The offense is going to go through him. And to me, then with the rest of the way his game really started to develop, and I thought at times last year you could talk about him being a solid Selke candidate, I just think it's going to mean really good things, and a lot of other pieces will fall in place for the Blues.
Curbs, how much do you read into the fact that this will be tonight the second preseason game for Zach Bolduc? The first one he played with Pavel Buchnevich and Jake Neighbors, and tonight he's playing with Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou.
I don't know that I read a whole lot into it. I read the fact that, you have 7 preseason games. Over the last few years, we've played as many as 8. I think that I just think that Doug Armstrong's going to have a patient approach. And Alex, and Joey and I did this before the last game, we sit down and you try to pencil in how you see your lines coming together. And with Pavel Buchnevich in the middle, and assuming that Dalibor Dvorsky does not start with the big club, so those are my 2 caveats here. There's a hole on the second line on that right side. Now, does that get filled by Texier, who Drew Bannister said can move up the lineup if he improves his defensive game? Is that kind of slated for Bolduc already? And let's see how he goes. It's going to be there. I fully came into camp expecting Bolduc to get 3 or 4, most likely 4 of these games. And I obviously I think the way he's playing 2 of the first 3 puts him in that. So I don't read a whole lot into it, but I am looking forward to seeing how his camp continues to progress, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. We're talking to Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues here on 101 ESPN. And Kerbs, you mentioned a name that I did want to ask you about in Texier. I find him to be kind of one of the potential X factors for this team heading into the season. Bannister was asked the other day about playing him at center, and he said it's something they're going to consider. They're not going to rush it, though. How do you view his potential as a center for the Blues? Is that something you think they will or should explore?
It's kind of a multifaceted question there, BK, because if you go back to what we were talking about on Monday on the opening drive, one of the reasons I felt that Radek Faksa probably gets penciled in as your third-line center is if you go through and you look at who the Blues are playing at center in different practices and things like that, there's not a whole lot of experience in there if you're going to put Buchnevich at center and put Shen on the wing. So, to me, I do think they want to try different guys out. We'll see Dylan Holloway get some shifts at center. We'll see Texier get some shifts at center. You know that Sundqvist can play center when he comes back. The question is, do you want him on his knees doing that kind of thing? Is there an opportunity for Walker? There's a lot of question marks in terms of how the depth shakes out when it comes to center. So, yeah, I think they'll look at Texier there. In talking to some guys from Columbus, he's played there some. He's played some on the wing. I'm not exactly sure, to be honest with you. I don't know how to handicap how the center position really shakes out in the bottom 6 on this team just yet. We're early enough into camp, and they have options. The snag is, and what really, to me, makes it, you said X factor, and that's the key. Let's face it, Holloway's an X factor. Texier's an X factor. Joseph, bit of an X factor. There are enough X factors, and I think this is what the Blues have done. The Blues went out. They got players with a lot of potential that they're pretty confident they know what they can bring, but have the ability to take a next step. And the real success of this team is going to be, do they do that? They've got a lot of X factors, I think, when it comes to that. I just don't know yet how they're sorting through the center position and where that puts Texier, and whether it's in the middle or on the wing.
So, Curbs, listening to Bannister talk yesterday, he was speaking of the first 2 preseason games and talked a little bit about, a little too much sticking fractions, and they're trying to get rid of the bad habits that carried over from last year early on in the preseason. How do you balance when you're watching these preseason games of where it's still early in preseason versus, okay, those are things that still need to get tightened up before the opening of the regular season?
I think it's still early in the preseason, the way I look at that, Alex. What I have seen in these games so far, what I've actually seen in some of the practices on top of it, is is a lot of like sticks around the hips, sticks around the waist. I've seen a lot of young guys, right? Some of the players that just went back to junior. Some of the younger players where you see them playing against NHL players where the speed is different, the thought process is different, the game is much more direct. I mean, I'm watching it going, well, that would have been a penalty. That would have been a penalty. No way you're going to get away with that. That's a problem, right? That kind of thing. So I've seen a lot of that. What Drew Bannister is harping on is getting rid of it, so you're setting that standard. I think we'll see that standard clean up a little bit here as as camp moves along and some other guys get moved out. You start to get the game grooves. So keep in mind, like right now, they're still practicing in 3 totally different groups that have full lineups of forwards and defensemen, right? And you're seeing young guys with veteran guys, so management can get an idea of can some guys keep up that kind of thing. Sometimes some of those habits can be a little bit difficult early in camp, and we're a week in.
All right, Curbs, final question for you as we're talking to Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues, for his weekly segment here with us on BK and Ferrario. We were listening to the Spit and Chicklets podcast, and they had Doug Armstrong on there earlier this week. He compared Jake Neighbors to a player that he had in Dallas and Brendan Morrow. What do you think of that comparison, Curbs?
Yeah, if there's a player that I think Doug Armstrong has referred to a lot in his latter career as general manager after leaving Dallas, and that he's had just immense respect for, it's Brendan Morrow, which also I think explains why Brendan played 71 games for the St. Louis Blues, and Doug Armstrong brought him in kind of in that leadership role, around 13, 14, when the Blues were really starting to come together and start to get good.
Good recall.
Yeah, I think that's it's an interesting comparison. The challenge with Brendan Morrow is this. When Brendan Morrow came up with the Dallas Stars, the game was different. You look at him, and this is a guy that several times in his career had 100-plus penalty minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the game was different. Jake Neighbors seems to have that old soul. I mean, hell, the other night at the Blues and Brewsville, when we said, what would you have in you could have one song you had to listen to. I think he said Billy Joel's New York State of Mind. I went, okay, didn't see that coming. And I said that, and he goes, old soul. I go, yeah, apparently. So I think, listen, what I'm seeing in Jake Neighbors, guys, I'm seeing the ability to mix with veterans and the ability to absolutely mix with young guys. Veterans like to be around him. They like to talk to him. He can handle his own in a conversation. You're seeing a play on the ice that is old style of just give it everything you got, put your body out there, do what you're told, play hard. That gets you the respect of coaches. That gets you the respect of veterans. You see him on the ice hanging with young players when some of the veterans have left after practice. Leadership ability in this young man. And just, I've said this before. I interviewed Barrett Jackman before Game 1 with the St. Louis Blues. I feel like Jake Neighbors has that kind of maturity to him already, like Barrett Jackman had, where you go, this guy's not a rookie. I think that Jake Neighbors in today's game, because of the way today's game is played, I think Jake Neighbors should have, and you should expect more of an offensive upside than Brendan Morrow. But if you have the character, the style, the commitment to the game, and the type of individual, you've got one hell of a hockey player, and it's a fair comparison.
Hey, Curbs, appreciate the time as always, man. Enjoy the game tonight. People can hear it right here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Blues at the Blue Jackets. The battle for the Blue is back, baby.
Oh, yeah, baby.
It's back tonight right here on 101 ESPN. Pre-game coverage with Alex starting at 5 o'clock. Fast lane, a bunch of slackers are going to be off a little bit early today. So we've got Curbs, Joey, Alex. That's all coming your way starting tonight at 5 o'clock. Curbs, appreciate the time as always, man. We'll talk with you again next week.
Cheers, fellas. Have a good week.
Same to you. That's Chris Kerber, voice of the Blues, joining us as he does each and every Wednesday here on BK and Ferrario. Alex, this center position is going to drive me bonkers this year. I can already tell.
I know, man. You just don't like Radek Faksa. You'll like him, I promise.
It's not that I don't like Radek Faksa. It's that I think the Blues are doing with Faksa what the Cardinals do with a bunch of guys. Like, Radek Faksa, to me, is a good comparison for you, Alex, I think. He's Brendan Donovan. If Brendan Donovan
you wanted to lock Brendan Donovan up to a 10-year deal.
That's why I'm using this comparison, because I'm trying to show you, like, I like Radek Faksa. I think he brings something to the table in a specific role. Brendan Donovan, a really nice player. Decent batting average, really high on base, but doesn't really slug a whole lot. Plays all over the diamond. You feel good about him. He's a good player to have in your lineup. If he's your cleanup hitter, you got problems, though. And that's how I feel about Radek Faksa. If Radek Faksa is your third-line center, if he's playing in the top 9, I don't think you feel great about your center depth. If he's your fourth-line center, I think you feel great about it. You just set him there, you forget about it, you don't have to worry about it. So that, to me, is the distinction with him. But it's beyond that. It's the Buchnevich thing. I think I personally, as a hockey guy myself, think that they're misutilizing that really big asset for them by putting him at center.
And that's why I think you don't like the idea of Radek Faksa. It's not because Faksa at the third line center. It's because you don't have the strength on the middle at the second line center.
It's not. It's both. I think they should have. Again, far be it from me to tell the bleep and blues what to do, but I think Shin should be your second line center. And I think there should be other options for you as your third line center right now, which should include, in my opinion, Holloway and Texier, and let's see what it looks like for some of these other options. Like, check out the young guys and find out, can they have more upside than what you're currently anticipating out of Faksa?
So let me ask you this, though. If, let's say, Faksa's numbers at the end of the season are 13 goals and 38 points, 13 goals, 25 assists as a third-line center, how would you feel about that?
I feel like that's underwhelming offensively.
That's what Tyler Bozak had the year that the Blues won the Stanley Cup, as a third-line center with Robert Thomas and Pat Maroon. Now, it wasn't always that because they shifted guys around, but that's what they had. But they had that because you had Ryan O'Reilly sporting numbers at the number 1 center and Braden Shen.
They also had elite, and I mean elite, goal suppression. Yeah. If this team's going to have elite goal suppression, if I know that going in, I can expect less in terms of the offensive upside. I don't view it that way. I don't think this team has that capability.
I think that's what Radek Faksa has the ability to do when he's on the ice, though. And I mean, this is a guy
But it's beyond him. That team, look at the defensive core, man.
Well, and
this team doesn't have that.
And this is why it comes to the Buchnevich at the center, or the second center spot, because we're talking about a third line center to where like the top 2 are the ones that are going to have to do a bulk load of work. I think Faksa by the end of this is going to provide defensive stability down the middle, which Kevin Hayes was a liability last season when he was playing the center position for you. I don't know if he puts up points. The thing about Faksa is he put 19 points up last year, 20 points the year prior, 19 the year prior, and he was although 3 years ago he was a third liner, last year he was a fourth liner.
Yeah, he's the last 2 years he's been playing fourth line minutes for the
And
Dallas
he got 19 and 20 points. So what does he get as a third liner with a Matthew Joseph and Dylan Holloway?
He was a third line center and he got 20 points as well. He has not had more than 20 points in a season since the 2018-2019 season.
Yeah.
It's been 5 years. Like, think about what has changed for the Blues in the last 5 years.
To me, that's your best option as a third-line center because of his defensive prowess, his size, and his north-south style. If somebody else takes the crown in the second-line center that pushes Booch out of it, I can hear the conversation of maybe shifting. Like, the way this works is Braden Shen takes the third one, but you've got to have a Dvorsky take the second-line spot. I just think as of now, it doesn't look good by Radek Faksa because what the last 2 years looked like. By the end of the season, I think you look at Radek Faksa and say, hey, that was at least somewhat of a stability at your third-line center spot.
Yeah, I'd just rather try it with Texier first.
Texier is the one I don't want to do. I think he's a liability more than anything.
Really?
I mean, the year he was this. So first off, the year he was a centerman, where he played a majority of it at center with Columbus. He was 36% from the faceoff dot. I mean, that's Pavel Buchnevich, and you got to win faceoffs at some point. Fox has been like 56% the last couple of years, but it goes beyond that. If that's the only thing that we're talking about here, I just think I think that starts the puck possession though on offense, or defense. If you're in the defensive zone and you need to go north as a third line, if you've got Holloway and Joseph, those are your aggressors. You got to get somebody who can retrieve the puck for you, or who can solidify the puck off of the faceoff dot. Texier worries me because they're concerned about moving him into the top 6 because of his defense. And if they don't want to use him in the top 6 as a winger, I don't know if you want him as a centerman as the third line.
Then I certainly don't think he's a fourth line player. Let's put it that way.
Well,
he's
that's
Alex
true.
Ferrario. That's Bradford Bruns. I'm Brandon Kiley. They just got a lot of moving pieces. It'll be interesting to see how they go about finding the best combinations for them on the ice. They got plenty of time to be able to do it. They still got some time. We've already seen them shake up the lines. I'm sure they'll do it again. Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers here on 101 ESPN.
Kickstart your mornings with the opening drive on 101 ESPN. Get in the know first on everything St. Louis sports with Brooke Grimsley, Dan McLaughlin, and Randy Carricker. The opening drive, weekday mornings from 7 to 10 on 101 ESPN.
The opening drive is presented by Sumner One.
the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. You've got questions, we may have the answers. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's questions and answers.
Presented by Window World St. Louis.com. Simply the best for less.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. If you guys have any questions, get them in right now on the Air Comfort Service text line. Alex, Bradford, myself will answer them here on BK and Ferrario. Start with this, Alex, from the 314. Should the Cardinals trade Helsley to a team with the condition that they can get Michaelis as well and pay half of his remaining contract?
No. Ryan Helsley, if he is traded by himself for a package that benefits the Cardinals.
I agree.
You should not dampen down the return on Ryan Helsley so you can get rid of a bad contract. You should pay a bad contract and get rid of it. You should pay half of it and just ship him out if you don't want him here. But no, Ryan Helsley should be a part of his own package, and you should be seeing some type of top prospect or close to a top prospect coming back in return.
As you've basically been saying the whole time, you have to optimize your compensation, right? Otherwise, you're just compromising yourself.
Yeah. What he said there, that's
because
exactly
you didn't understand any of it. God, Bradford,
that was deliberate that time, just for you.
Totally agree. They should be trying to maximize their return. They should not be adding him to
I concur.
sweeten the pot for a Miles Michaelis deal. From the 501, guys, do you think that the Blue Jays would listen this offseason for offers for Vlad Guerrero Jr.? That's the guy that to me makes the most sense.
I would agree.
If you're going to try to get offense, I think he's probably the player. Every offseason, though, there are teams that decide, you know what, it's time for us to go in a different direction. And I don't know who those teams are going to be this year. Toronto feels like an ideal candidate, but I don't know what's going to happen with them. It could be that they decide, hey, we're going to trade the shortstop instead of Vlad Guerrero Jr. I don't know. And the Cardinals aren't probably going to be in the mix for a Bo Bichette. I don't think he makes sense for them, what they're looking for. I don't know who the other teams would be in this scenario. Like, is Texas going to be trying to overhaul their roster? My guess would be no.
Who do you want off of their roster?
Does Brent Rooker become available? We talked about him at the deadline. I think the A's will probably end up keeping him, but I don't know. I don't know who these players are.
I mean, I think it's Vlad. I think it's Vlad Guerrero Jr. That's going to come down to contract negotiations. Is he willing to sign the contract with Toronto and is Toronto willing to give him the money that he's deserved? Because if not, I could see that changing. If he's not going to stay in Toronto because he doesn't get a really clear plan of what the team's future is, or if the team's underselling it because they don't feel like Vlad Guerrero Jr. is consistent like T-Bone believes, I could see that going a different direction. And now's the time to do it if you're going to trade him, because you don't want to trade him at the deadline when he's got half of a year left. He'd be like priority number one if I'm the Cardinals and trying to reset things quickly. I'd be calling Toronto and saying, like, what do we need to get this done?
You guys realize how remarkably durable he's been in the last 4 seasons, too. 155 games played in each of the past 4 seasons. And I would argue that outside of 2021, I'd say this has been his best big league year. His WAR's over 6 yet again.
Here's another one that I'll ask you about, because we've talked about him in the past, and I know everybody on the text line is bringing him up. Do you try and trade for Robert and hope he has a bounce-back season?
You could. I mean, it's an option.
I mean, because he has not been good this season. He's been hurt, but he's not been good, and he's been injured years prior to 2023. But he's also 26 years old and had an MVP caliber season last year.
Anthony Santander is a guy that a lot of people have brought up as a possibility. He'll be 30 years old. I would like to see something more in the vein of what you're talking about, Alex, where they finally go get somebody that's in their prime, whether it's Robert, Vlad Guerrero Jr. I don't know who that player is. And I don't know that they're going to make these big moves that we're looking for. Maybe they say, hey, we think we have that guy internally, and his name is Jordan Walker, and we're just going to continue to build around him. That's possible. But I think they do need to try to improve this offense. And the places to do so is by going out and likely making a trade. I do not think they're going to be involved significantly in the free agency market this offseason. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line to get involved in the show. From the 636, guys, what do you think about trading Helsley and a prospect for Vlad? I think it would take a lot more than that. If the Blue Jays end up trading Vlad Guerrero Jr., I think they're signaling some kind of a retool.
Yeah.
I would be curious to see what that means for their rotation as well. Maybe you could make even a bigger package where
one pitcher and who was the guy that we talked about before the trade deadline. What was the guy that I was obsessed with?
Chris Bassett?
Yeah, Chris Bassett. You go after get Bassett and Vlad Guerrero Jr.
Yeah, I mean, I would be aiming for more upside. Like, what does Jose Barrios look like in that scenario? But, yeah, you could go try to get a starter and potentially Vlad Guerrero Jr. That's making, I mean, that's a big move, though.
Yeah,
so
that's
I don't
like
know. That's a Padres move.
I was just going to say that's a Padres move.
It's a Padres, a Yankees.
Maybe Hein Bloom comes in and his hero is A.J. Preller. And he's like, let's just do this. Let's change it up, guys.
Yeah.
Go for broke.
What we've heard about Hein
Get
Bloom.
weird.
Definitely a guy that goes out and makes
likes to
super
get weird.
aggressive moves and tries really hard to go get the biggest name possible. That's
Or trade that biggest name possible away. Either one.
Mookie Betts? Is that what you're referencing?
No.
When you traded him away?
No, man. That's not what I was talking about. I was talking about his time in Tampa.
That's Bradford. I'm BK. Coming up in 15 minutes, we're going to get into some NFL quick hitters. But next, the Cardinals should learn a lesson or two from the Jordan Walker experience a couple of years ago and apply it to one of their current top prospects going into next season. We'll tell you who that is next year on 101 ESPN.
Each week this season, the Rizzuto Show and the Fast Lane are battling out in the Pick'em Challenge, but sometimes we get together and just hang out and watch some football. Hook up with me and learn next Thursday from 6:30 to 8:30 at Helen Fitzgerald's. Again, that's next Thursday. We'll be there watching football, be hanging out, having a great time, enjoying a couple of cold Bud Lights. We'll be at Helen Fitzgerald's on Lindbergh in Sunset Hills. Come out, enjoy yourself, have a great time. Again, that is at Helen Fitzgerald's next Thursday, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m.
Hey, it's BK, and it is time to unlock your inner champion. The place to do so is Victory Men's Health. You can check out their 4 great locations across the St. Louis area. Plus, check them out online today. Learn all about what they can do for you at victorymenshealth.com. They unlocked my inner champion. I went in there. I told them, hey, listen, I don't have the same energy that I once did. I turned 30, and suddenly I'm running around the house with a little guy, and I just don't have that same amount of energy that I once did. I was taking midday naps. It was no good. I was getting less out of my runs as well. They said, you know what, let's take this micronutrient lab and we'll find out where all of your levels are. That includes testosterone levels, all of your different vitamin deficiencies potentially that are there. Found out I was a little bit low on some of my vitamins, and they were able to help me out with that. They can do the same thing for you, whether it's weight loss goals that you want to be able to meet, low testosterone potentially, erectile dysfunction issues, whatever it is, they could potentially help you out with it over at Victory Men's Health. So check them out today. Booking an appointment is super easy. Go to victorymenshealth.com. That's victorymenshealth.com today.
Max Shows presents the St. Charles Gun Show. Shop hundreds of tables with thousands of guns, knives, military surplus, tactical gear, and more. You gotta go to the Gun Show this Saturday and Sunday at the St. Charles Convention Center. Visit maxshows.com.
sports source in St. Louis that matters. WXOS HD1 East St. Louis, 101 ESPN. We're right back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Has been one of the best pitchers in all of minor league baseball this season. So much so, Alex, that yesterday it was announced officially Baseball America named him the minor league pitcher of the season. They've been doing this for the past 3 years. He is the third player to be awarded the minor league pitcher of the year. And we're not talking about just for the Cardinals organization. This isn't some like, hey, he was a Texas League MVP or something like that, or the Cardinals named him their minor league pitcher of... No, this is for the entire minor league system. Baseball America, which is a third-party observer, a third-party evaluator, has said he is the best pitcher that existed this year in the minor leagues. It's no surprise. He went out there and was absolutely dominant for the Cardinals, went all the way from low A all the way up to AAA by the end of the season. So far this year on the season, 2.7 ERA for the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, he has run into some troubles so far at AAA. That's to be expected. He typically adjusts after a few starts, and then he figures out his level. Alex, I think for a lot of people, they see stuff like this kind of an accolade for Quinn Matthews. They get excited about the pedigree. He's leading all of minor league baseball with 200 strikeouts so far this year. He's 23 years old. This isn't some high school pitcher that a year in has developed quicker than they expected. Now, this dude was a big-time innings eater in his time at Stanford and has come in and is already at 143 innings for the Cardinals this year down in the minors. I don't want them to rush him. I want the Cardinals to learn some lessons from what happened with Jordan Walker. Obviously, it's apples to oranges in terms of pitchers versus position players, but they have admitted openly we rushed Jordan Walker. We got excited by the talent. We got excited by what he was able to do, and then we essentially gave him the job coming out of spring training. Even though he struggled down the stretch, said, hey, let's see what this looks like with him at the major league level. We've got a position. Let's go ahead and give it to him. He got that hitting streak, but it was all very unsustainable. They have to send him back down, and we know what's happened ever since. And I think the trajectory of his career was altered by the way that the Cardinals rushed him to the major league level. If there's a lesson to be learned from what the Cardinals have done over the past couple of seasons, it is to not rush Quinn Matthews. Do not hand him a spot in the rotation going into next season. I would like to see them slow play this a little bit. Give him a month at AAA next year to find his level again. And if he earns his way onto the big league rotation and he forces his hand for you, hey, man, more power to him. But I would not be rushing this guy to the big league level.
I'm 100% with you. I mean, don't get excited by this new toy that you have in front of you that you haven't had in some time in terms of the potential for a top of the rotation pitcher. I'm not going to label him an ace or even a number one, but this guy definitely doesn't look like a guy you'd be penciling in as a 4 or a 5 with the strikeout numbers. And I mean, if you're the Cardinals, look no further than down the street to what the Blues are doing with a lot of their guys. I mean, Doug Armstrong has said both with Zach Bolduc and Dalibor Dvorsky that those guys will be making this NHL roster as top 6 forwards. And if they're not playing at the NHL level. I think if you're the Cardinals, after watching what happened with Jordan Walker and a little bit with Nolan Gorman as well, you got to be looking at Quinn Matthews, especially because he's a pitcher. Like, position players, one thing. The Cardinals have not had a lot of success in terms of durability with their young pitchers that project to be number 1s or number 2s. If you're the Cardinals, you need to be looking at Quinn Matthews and saying, look, buy into the hype. Get excited for this kid when spring training comes along. If you want to call it a competition, that's great. But Quinn Matthews will be a part of this rotation as a 2 or a 3 starting things out. He's not going to come here and be a 5 or a 6, maybe a bullpen guy. He'll go up, he'll go down. Until he is ready to be here and be here for good, he's going to keep staying in the minors, and he's going to keep pitching in the minors.
He should not be a reliever. This guy is not somebody that I'm bringing up to be a reliever at the big league level. His expectation is he comes up and is a mid-rotation starter for you. That's what you want Quinn Matthews to ultimately become.
You can't go the same path with him like you did with Andre Palante, where it's like, oh, what are you?
Matthew Liberatore, Zach Thompson. Like all of these guys that have come up that were previously big-time prospects for the Cardinals within their organization, it feels like they all kind of have the same path where it's starter, reliever, AAA, starter, reliever, AAA. And it just like they bounce all around. That can't be what you do with this kind of a prospect, the pedigree that you have right now, you've got to really hit on this one. So, Alex, yesterday, Kyle Reese, who covers the Cardinals minor league system, posted something on Twitter about Quinn Matthews, and I found it to be absolutely fascinating. He said, if Quinn Matthews had the exact same career as Jaime Garcia, would you consider that to be a disappointment, or would that please you? If it disappoints you, that you think that doesn't match the hype. If it pleases you, that matches what the hype is right now for Quinn Matthews as a pitcher. 53% of the more than 1,500 votes said that would be a disappointment for Quinn Matthews to have the same career with the Cardinals as Jaime Garcia. Alex, I went through earlier this morning to see, okay, where does Jaime Garcia rank in terms of drafted and developed pitchers for the Cardinals since 2000 in innings pitched? Drafted and developed by the Cardinals, so Waino doesn't count, Chris Carpenter doesn't count. Where would he rank? The answer is third since 2000. The only guys that are ahead of him in terms of innings pitched for the Cardinals, drafted and developed since 2000, Lance Lynn, Matt Morris, Jaime Garcia is third. Behind him, it's Michael Wacha, Carlos Martinez, and Jack Flaherty. Alex, what would your answer to that question be? Would it be considered a success for you if Quinn Matthews has the same career as Jaime Garcia?
For me, yes. Now, I kind of toe that line because originally when I saw the tweet from Kyle, I didn't see the poll numbers, but when I saw the tweet, in my head, I said, well, yeah, that'd be a disappointment because Jaime Garcia went through some injuries in St. Louis. And, like, as good as he was, you had, 6 years of him in St. Louis, and I think 4 of those 6, he pitched a full season for you. So, I would hope that you have more of Quinn Matthews as a long-term pitcher for you. But I know how pitchers go. Injuries happen. And the 4 years that Jaime Garcia pitched for this Cardinals team, this dude was pitching like a number 2 or a number 3. Like he was somewhere around high 2s, mid 3s ERAs, and he was posting 20 to 30 starts for you. He had strikeout numbers. He was from the left side. So yes, I would want a career longer than Jaime Garcia, but if I'm going off of, let's just say Quinn Matthews has to deal with injuries like every pitcher does. If you're going to give me 6 years or you're going out there and you're sporting somewhere around a 3.2 ERA, yeah, that is a success in my book.
Bradford, how would you feel about that? If Quinn Matthews has the exact same career as a Cardinal as Jaime Garcia, is that considered a success for you?
Well, to use one of your favorite expressions, I'm not exactly sure that I would push the button and accept it right away. But if you honestly take away the last campaign that Jaime Garcia had here in St. Louis and look at the body of work over the first 7 seasons during which he went 52-32, and Alex, as you stated, with an ERA in the low to mid 3s, he was fantastic for long stretches. Now, did he post consistently each and every year? That was the problem. He ran into recurring injury issues. But the fact of the matter, the fact of the matter is that
I've heard that before.
You remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that. I was in the locker room that post game when he had to speak to the media, and it was very uncomfortable.
And honestly, I do wonder how much of the numbers in that poll are influenced by the personality. We tend to remember the tail end of his career in St. Louis, and not favorably at that. But if you're talking to me right now about the progression, the ultimate projection there for Quinn, and I'm looking right now and I'm thinking, okay, exactly what he could turn out to be. You're so enamored with how he has grown and developed in just the last 6 to 9 months alone. I'd absolutely be satisfied with that, albeit with a slightly higher ceiling. Absolutely.
I don't think he has a higher ceiling than this.
Quinn Matthews?
A 3.5 ERA in his time with the Cardinals. I'm not sure Quinn Matthews has a higher ceiling than that. If I'm being totally honest with you, I think Quinn Matthews is going to be a good pitcher for the Cardinals. That's a great pitcher for the Cardinals. I think we are underselling just how good Jaime Garcia was in his time here in St. Louis because of what you're talking about with the personality. He was prickly. He was not exactly...
Not reliable.
I hate calling out toughness for athletes because those guys deal with stuff that I can't even imagine, and I would go on the IL the first time that my elbow started to twinge. I'd be like, no, I can't do it.
My tummy would hurt when they would say, hey, you're pitching game 3 of the playoffs. I'd be like, no, sorry, man, irritable bowel syndrome, I'm out.
Exactly. So, it's far be it for me to call them out, but in a sport full of alphas, it didn't always feel like that was the case for Jaime. And so I understand why there were times where Cardinals fans were like, get this guy off of my team. But ultimately, if we're just talking about production-wise, what the Cardinals were able to get out of him, which was 150 starts over his career here in St. Louis for almost 900 innings and a 3.5 ERA, Dude, I'm hitting the button immediately and signing up for that, and that is an overwhelming success. I know it felt like he didn't post, but I just mentioned he's the third best dude in the last 24 years by the Cardinals. Excuse me, I'm getting emotional here. Drafted and developed in terms of innings pitched. He might not have posted very often. He posted better than every other pitcher other than Lance Lynn and Matt Morris that they've drafted in the last 25 years. That has to matter to me. At some point, I have to look at that and be like, you know what? Yeah, that's an overwhelming success, and it's frustrating that the Cardinals haven't been able to draft and develop better than this, but it's the truth. So if you've got him and you've got Palante, talking about Quinn Matthews and Palante as the back-end starters for you, and I think Quinn Matthews in this scenario is like a really good number 3 starter and potentially even a number 2 starter for you in a postseason series, depending on if he has that like grit, toughness, alpha mentality once you get to the playoffs. I think you'd feel really good about it. I would sign up for it today.
Jaime Garcia in his first 3 years, just averaging those 3 seasons together in 162 games. Tell me if you'd be okay with this. A 14-9 record, 34 starts, 204 innings, 164 strikeouts.
Yeah, I mean, immediately.
And he had a 3.3, like in those 3 years combined, he had a 3.3 ERA average.
And maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here, but look at the manner in which he threw as well on the postseason stage. By and large, he came through specifically in 2011. You're giving him the ball in the DS Game 3, World Series Game number 2 and 6. He was there and he was effective when you needed him the most.
Don't look beyond that. Don't look at any other game that he pitched outside of 2011. But 2011, it was pretty good. The rest of it was a little different. Didn't quite go the same way, but 2011 happened, and you can't take that away from him ever.
Ever?
Never.
Like you can never live it down?
That's right. He's Alex. That's Bradford. I'm BK. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, is it an either-or situation for the Blues with Pavel Buchnevich or Texier at center for them going into this season? We'll talk about that coming up in about 15 minutes. NFL Quick Hitters is next here on 101 ESPN.
This is Brayden Shen, and it's game day on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN.
Blues Game Day is presented by Buffalo Wild Wings, the ultimate arena for wings and wins.
The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely on advertisements.
If you've been hurt on the job, you need the best. Onder Law. Hurt on the job? Call Onder Law today for a free review at 314 or 618-9000000.
This is Ron from Swiss Air Heating and Cooling. For the last 35 years, I've been known as the Wizard of Comfort. With the super hot days winding down, our savings are ramping up. Now is the time to replace your old and inefficient heating and cooling system. You can get up to $2,500 in instant rebates on a Daikin system plus 0% financing. Act now and I'll include a 12-year parts and labor warranty. That's 12 years of worry-free operation. $2,500 in instant rebates, 0% financing, and a 12-year parts and labor warranty. Find us online at SwissAirSTL.com.
This is exactly where you want to be listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
All right, let's dive into some NFL quick hitters with Alex Ferrario and Bradford Bruns. I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. We'll get back to the Blues coming up here in just a little bit. But, Alex, let's start with the NFL today. Some quick hitters. And I do want to talk a little bit more about that Monday night game that we saw. We didn't spend a ton of time yesterday on Jaden Daniels, the star rookie sensation for the Washington Commanders. They have not punted in their last two games. They've scored on every possession over those two games. What are you seeing right now with Jaden Daniels, and what do you view as his current potential?
I mean, I see a composed quarterback, especially when you look around the league and you look at these other quarterbacks that were drafted in the same draft. And I mean, you're talking about Bo Nix, who just had his breakout game, which I don't know how much I believe in that. Caleb Williams has been fine, but he lacks protection. I mean, I didn't expect Washington to be any good this season. And the fact that Jaden Daniels has stepped in there and has kept his team competitive in almost every single game, but on top of it, he's still making the big plays. Now, are some of them YOLO plays like Anthony Richardson? Probably. That one to Terry McLaurin on Monday night was like, oh, let's see what happens on this. But
he's got
an arm.
He's got an arm, and he's super accurate.
And he understands that when the pressure comes in on him, he can elude it and find an opening. And guess what Caleb Williams can't do? Get out of panic or get out of a pressure situation. He goes down quick. So I'm impressed. I said it yesterday. He feels a lot like what C.J. Stroud felt like from that draft, where everyone was talking about the other quarterbacks, and C.J. Stroud was kind of this, hey, I'm still here, guys, and it has the most successful season out of all of them.
I think there's something to the idea that he had 55 starts at the collegiate level, and that's part of why he's having this amount of success. Because that's a different story than what happened with C.J. Stroud. C.J. Stroud only had 27 college starts. But do you think there's something to that?
I think so. Now, how many games did Caleb Williams have as a starter?
Like 35. He was a 3-year starter.
And to me, there's the difference. Because Caleb Williams, again, when pressure comes, he just stands in the pocket and tries to find a play downfield. When pressure comes to Jaden Daniels, he can elude it and still find ways to command the ability to get a first down.
And doesn't it also feel as if Washington at least has a more competent option in the backfield, too? I understand that Robinson didn't exactly bust out against Cincinnati, but you go back a week prior against the Giants, he's racking up 100 yards on the ground. He has a bit more flash and dash, and at the same time, I think can run between the tackles, whereas Chicago's looking for that guy. He's not there.
Yeah. I think the coordinator has everything to do with that as well. I think that in Washington, I'm not the biggest fan of Cliff Kingsbury, but I think he's done a much better job than what they have had so far this year with Shane Waldron in Chicago. Waldron, I think we're looking now at what Seattle's doing, and it's fair to be like, okay, maybe that was more about their talent than it was Shane Waldron being some great offensive coordinator. I think he might be a liability for Caleb Williams. I'll be curious to see how they view that as an organization. Alex, tomorrow night, Cowboys are on the road against the New York Giants. Thursday night football. By the way, each week the Riz Show and the Fastlane battle it out in the Pick'em Challenge, but sometimes they come together to hang out and watch some football. They'll be watching Cowboys versus Giants tomorrow night. You can Learn from the Riz Show and Jamie Rivers from the Fastlane, 6:30 to 8:30 at Helen Fitzgerald's. Thursday night football. Sign up for the Point and 101 ESPN giveaways and enjoy a cold Bud Light. It's at Helen Fitzgerald's on Lindbergh and Sunset Hills tomorrow night. If the Cowboys lose this game, then blank.
Mike McCarthy's fired. I thought Jerry Jones was walking down in the locker room to fire him after the last time, or the game against the Ravens. If you lose that game, Mike McCarthy's fired. I mean, because Jerry Jones, when he was talking with the media in that great voice we all love to hear, he was talking about how we have all the pieces in place, meaning like roster-wise, we're set. You've got your quarterback, you've got your pass rusher, you've got your weapon on the wide receiver front. That seems an awful lot like you're pointing at the coaching staff and saying, we've given you the right pieces, you haven't done anything with them. So I think McCarthy's fired if they lose that game.
It's interesting because I almost felt as if in week number 3, it was such a desperation scenario for Baltimore. I wasn't shocked that the Ravens came out on top. The way that Lamb conducted himself after that game, the fact that if you're Dallas now, you've lost both home games. You owned that place in each of the prior 2 seasons. So to come out in any sort of a way and be even remotely flat, I'm not anticipating it. But yeah, I think you're getting to the point, Alex, at which heads are going to have to roll.
They've got a bye week in week 7. The next 2 weeks after this game against the Giants at Pittsburgh, not exactly an easy task, and then at home against Detroit. I don't think people would get fired after this game if they lose. I don't think this is the time when you make that move. But that bye week, there's absolutely the potential that they would make the switch then. The problem is, like, you're going to put Mike Zimmer in charge? That's your answer?
No, you go call Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
Good optics there.
That's the one that everybody's going to talk about. I mean, what was it, a couple of years ago, Indianapolis called Jeff Saturday. Yeah. They're like, hey, come in from ESPN. It's the same thing, basically, with Bill Belichick, except, you've got the Hall of Fame career instead of a guy that's never coached above
and we
the
all
high
know
school level.
what Bill is doing with this television stuff. He's trying to make sure everybody realizes, like, hey, I'm a cool cat. I'm not this jerk you guys thought I was.
I can relate.
I'm hip.
Alex, we made our predictions going into week 1 of the NFL season. We said, hey, here are the teams that we think are going to be playoff contenders. Here are the teams that we think maybe fall back. We've done this before. We did it after week 1. But after 3 weeks of the NFL season, if you could have one mulligan or one thing that you believed going into the year that you no longer do, good or bad, what would be the biggest thing that you have changed your opinion on through the first 3 weeks of this NFL season?
Probably that the Cowboys are one of the teams competing for a Super Bowl this year. I don't buy that anymore. Like, I think the NFC has just completely flipped what I thought it was. I think the 49ers are going to be fine. I think the Lions are going to be there. But, like, I thought the Eagles and Cowboys were going to be those other 2 juggernauts that were going to be competing for a Super Bowl. And now I don't believe that. I'm not even sure both of those teams make the playoffs. Mine would probably be the strength of what I thought the Cowboys were going to be.
I'll stay on the NFC side because I firmly believe that regardless of what happened in the offseason training camp with the San Francisco 49ers, that this team would essentially be bulletproof to begin the 2024 season. And we're seeing clear indications. Now, yes, injuries have been there, certainly, but in that division, especially now with the way in which Seattle is playing, is going to be more competitive than we would have perceived. Arizona, BK, you've said it on numerous occasions, that sneaky good team to monitor. Now you're getting more of those legitimate results. So how many hits can the 49ers weather? Maybe this just isn't the year for them.
I had 2 young teams that I went out on a limb for with young quarterbacks.
Yeah, well, I know one of them's in the AFC.
Yeah, one of them's in the NFC, and it was the Chicago Bears. I fell for the hype. I fell for it. I thought Caleb Williams was going to be better than this early on. I thought that maybe he wouldn't have quite the upside that some people thought. Like fantasy football-wise, I didn't think that was going to be a guy that I would be interested in. But on the field, I thought, hey, he's going to make a few plays every game. They're not going to ask him to do too much. You're going to have this good running game, and it's been the opposite.
Well, they're making him do everything.
They need him to be really good because their running game has just been an atrocity so far. I was way too high on the Chicago Bears this early on, and I should have known better. I was also way too high on the Indianapolis Colts.
Way too high on the Indianapolis Colts.
Maybe one QB.
I have an MVP vote for Anthony Richardson out there at 35-1. Don't think I'm going to cash that ticket. I could probably throw it away today, and I wouldn't be wasting any money. He has 3 touchdowns and 6 interceptions on the season. It has not gone well. He is somehow averaging 8 yards per attempt despite completing less than 50% of his throws, and it's because every throw he makes is a YOLO ball. It's a 50-50 proposition if his guy comes down with it. And when it does, hey, man, big plays are coming. When it doesn't, it's really hard to conduct your offense because there is no efficiency to it whatsoever. So I was way too high. Their defense has not been nearly as good as I was expecting either. So those are the 2 things that I would probably take back. And on the positive side of things, I was too low on the Steelers. The Steelers defense, I find them to be so incredibly boring, and I allowed my heart to get it ahead of my mind. It's a team that's going to win like 10 games this year, Alex. None of us are going to be super impressed by it. They're going to throw for like 200 yards per game, and they're going to make the playoffs this year. I should have replaced the Colts with the Steelers, and we could have gone about our merry ways.
Yep, I'm with you. The Steelers one, I had to apologize to Grant on Sunday when I worked with him, because every show that I had done with Grant when he was filling in for us, he always kept coming back to the Steelers are going to be really good. The Steelers are going to be good. And it's like, Grant, what are you doing, man? Why are you so in on Russell Wilson and Justin Fields? I didn't take enough credit to the fact that defense, if healthy, is one of the best in the National Football League, and you've got one of the most consistent head coaches in Mike Tomlin.
The other team, I'm not sure just how much to buy in on them yet. They're 3-0, so he looks flashy, right? You're like, man, well, look at that record. The Seattle Seahawks so far have played Denver, New England, and Miami sans Tua. I don't know how much the record is real, but they're a good team. Not great, but they're good. And I think if I was to replace somebody in the NFC, if I was to replace the Bears with another NFC team, I would probably go with Seattle. I was probably a little too low on them coming into the season.
And they're doing this without Kenneth Walker, who's like a big piece of it.
Charbonnet's been good for them.
He has, but that's a 1-2 punch, kind of like what Detroit has with Montgomery and Gibbs. If you've got Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker, you could do some danger.
All right, coming up in about 15 minutes, we're going to dive into the junk drawer. Katie Woo, our Cardinals insider for The Athletic, will join us coming up at 1 o'clock. But next, is it an either-or situation for the Blues with Pavel Buchnevich or Alexander Texier at center for them this season? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN.
Text us anytime at 314-399-9646 on the Air Comfort Service Heating, Cooling, and Insulation text line on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario back with you to talk about my friends over at Classic Air Care, who have been making people comfortable since 1926. I speak about how I've been using them since 2016, part of their maintenance agreement, taking care of an older unit, had to buy a new one. They took care of me on that as well. Classic Air Care is there for all of your HVAC needs. They're also there for your plumbing needs, but don't just believe me. Check out their thousands of reviews. That's right, I said it right. Thousands of reviews, a 4.8 Google review rating, talking about their incredible customer service, like this one from Diane. Eric was out within hours of calling that our AC went out. We're new to the area, called after a recommendation from our neighbor. He answered every technician Eric did and felt he was very honest with us. We'll be asking for Eric by name the next time we get our cleaning as a part of the maintenance agreement. Highly recommend. So give Classic Air Care a call today and make them a mainstay in your home, taking care of your HVAC system. Call them, or you could check them out and schedule online at classicaircare.com. Just tell them Alex Ferrario sent you. Again, that's Classic Air Care and classicaircare.com.
can now watch 101 ESPN live on our Air Alliance Team Studio Cams. Catch every show live on our YouTube channel or at 101ESPN.com. 101 ESPN Studio Cams.
Presented by the Air Alliance Team Heating and Cooling. Getting the job done quickly, correctly, 100% of the time.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
Blues make their bid for first preseason win. I'm Bradford Bruns with your Sports Center update, driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Tonight on 101 ESPN, St. Louis tries to break through exhibition style versus Columbus. Puck drop happens right here at 6 p.m. Last weekend, of course, the Note lost consecutive matchups against Dallas and Utah. Number 11 Mizzou did not fall Saturday, but visiting Vandy made things perilously close in Columbia. Earlier, opening drive guest Eli Drinkwitz touched upon some recent defensive miscues.
There's a lot of improvement. I think the biggest improvement, tracking angles in our tackling, and obviously busted assignments. But we can't give up explosive play touchdowns, and we've given up 3 of those in the last 2 games. That once we get those taken off tape, I think again we can continue to improve.
Baseball, Eric Fetty's Cardinals tackle Colorado exactly 7 hours from now. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
They are St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
So I'm not saying that he can't play center, and I don't disagree with you guys that he could be your number 2 center until Dvorsky's ready or whomever. We're on the same page in terms of Buchnevich, I think, being best suited at wing, but how this team sets up and where they're trying to get to with Dvorsky and with Doug Armstrong again mentioning Buch, the second last name out of his mouth when he talked about that second-line center depth, that's the direction that I went.
That was Jeremy Rutherford on with us earlier this week talking about what the best usage is of Pavel Buchnevich. Alex, we're in line with JR. I think that Buch is long-term and, in my opinion, short-term best utilized as a winger for the St. Louis Blues. I do not think his long-term future is going to be as a centerman. Part of that is the lack of face-off winning ability. Another part of it is just, man, I think he's an excellent winger, and you just paid him $8 million to get the most out of him, and I think that is going to be on the wing long-term. That being said, they are utilizing him at center right now, and if I had to place a bet, I would place a bet on him being a second-line center on the opening night of the season. I bring that up because I did want to talk about the third-line center position because this has become my new obsession with the St. Louis Blues.
Yes, it has.
They're going with Buch. All right, let's see what that looks like. Now let's go one rung down, and that would be as the third-line center. As of today, I think Roddick Fox is the favorite to be that for you on opening night. They did bring up the possibility yesterday at practice of Alexander Texier playing some center for the Blues this year. Now, Bannister basically said, hey, I wouldn't read too much into this. It's just something that we're trying out right now. He's played some wing. He's played some center. We'll see what it looks like. Maybe this is something that we explore, but I don't want to rush into anything with him being a center for you. You mentioned earlier, Alex, Texier has some of the same face-off deficiencies that we have seen in the past with Pavel Buchnevich.
Yeah.
He's more of a winger that can play center than a center that can play on the wing. In your mind, if they go into opening night with Buch as their center on the second line, does that eliminate any possibility of Texier being your third-line center because of those face-off issues that both would potentially have for you?
I think so. And I think the defensive deficiencies of Alexander Texier is kind of the other reason why you wouldn't see him in the center position. I'd look at Texier a lot like I'd look at Holloway as options at the center spot. Could you use them there? Yes, but I don't think you want to use them there. One, because they're best suited for this team on the wing. Texier specifically, this is a guy that has the potential in a really good release on his shot, but he's got some defensive issues that kind of put him in bad positions. It's why Columbus really never got the feet wet with him. So I think if you're going to use Buch at the center spot, what they're doing there, if you just look at how they're slated to be, they're putting just consistency, stability, and the understanding that they're going to be reliable. Because the main thing with being a centerman, yes, offensively you're supposed to drive play and you're supposed to go north, but you are the first one back as a centerman on the ice. And if you're going to be the one driving the play on the offensive side, if you make a mistake, you've got to be the first one back. And I don't know if you want to do that with a guy like Texier, who's only got 100 games, I think, at the NHL level, compared to a guy like Radek Faksa that understands that role in that position.
This is one of those things where fans are going to have differing opinions with coaches. Because I'm sure Jamie Rivers would be listening to me right now, suggesting the possibility of Texier at center and be like, "You idiot! Like, how could you possibly even think that guy is going to play third line center for this team when he can't win faceoffs? He's not good defensively, and he's not going to drive play, and he's not going to be responsible coming back." And I get that. I think the difference between the way that I view this as just a fan of watching the team and the way that a coach would view it, which is understandable, and their way is probably correct long term. They've got to win games, and they go out there, and they're not worried about having fun. They're not worrying about having an aesthetically pleasing style of play. Whatever it is, whatever it takes to win games, that's what they're going to do. And Radek Faksa probably helps you win more games as your third-line center than Alexander Texier. But the upside with Texier is there, and if he is good, if he does figure out how to win more on the faceoff dot, well, he brings speed to the table. He brings way more offensive upside than Radek Faksa does there. So that's the way that I'm viewing it. But it's purely an upside play. And this gets back to the expectations for the 2024 season, Alex. If they were entering last year with this same roster, maybe they could have done that.
Yeah.
This year, I'm not sure that's the case. And this gets to something that Doug Armstrong had to say the other day on the Spit and Chicklets podcast. He was asked about Drew Bannister, how they got to him as their head coach, not just the interim, but the long-term plan there. Here's what he had to say, and about how the expectations have changed a bit on Bannister since being hired.
Everything seemed to point to giving him an opportunity, and we haven't been disappointed. He's run a great training camp, and probably his feet are a little hotter than he thought they might be just by the acquisitions we had over the summer, but he's excited about it. I think two guys, bringing a guy like Claude Julien, a guy that's won a cup, won the President's Trophy, been part of Canada's national teams on big stages, Olympics, World Cups, what a mentor it is for him. And you got Otter and Mike Weber learning from him. It's a really fun group to be around right now. And I think Drew was taking it all in. And Drew's like a young player, like a Jake Neighbors type player. He's at the start of the infancy of his career, and he wants to have a long career. And he's putting the work in to make sure he's going to be a good coach in this league for a long time.
The feet are a little hotter than what he expected to be at this point.
I was driving.
What did you make of that comment?
I was driving in, and I was just listening to it because our Blues producer, Graham Francis, was like, "Hey, you should check out Army on Spit and Chicklets." And so I listened, and when he said that, I hit rewind 30 seconds. I'm like, did he just say what I thought he said? And I'm like, oh, yeah, he did. This feels a lot like a comment by Army that everybody dwells on, and then you ask Army about it, and he's like, oh, yeah, that was just a comment. Sure. Kind of like when he said, I need to understand the younger players better, and then that next offseason was like, yeah, I didn't mean that. But
he did, though. By the way, he did mean it.
And he worked on it.
And he did work on it, and he did go and read a bunch of books. Like, he talks to a lot of people around the league about it.
But let's follow the breadcrumbs for a minute. He said that in terms of the depth of the roster, it feels a lot like what 2010, 2011, 2012, in that range.
Now, what happened in that range, Alex?
Well, 2010 was when Davis Payne was brought on board as the head coach. That was following the 2009-2010 season when Andy Murray was fired and Davis Payne stepped in. Payne had a full season underneath his belt, 38-33. Now, in that season, the Blues made some roster changes. They were like, this team's not doing it. They traded Eric Johnson to the Colorado Avalanche for Chris Stewart and Kevin Shattenkirk. Got more younger, but with a little bit more upside in a different direction. And then that next offseason, going into 2011-2012, they added Jamie Langenbrunner, Jason Arnott, Vladimir Sobotka, brought in some players to make their roster a little bit more competitive. And then this is the part where I'm not trying to say this, but 13 games in, it didn't look good, and they said, we need to get somebody who could get this team to the next level.
So who did they bring in?
Ken Hitchcock. And then they went on to win, I think it was 109 points that season, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
That team was really good. And then they got to where they opened up that window. I just took that as, prior to Drew Bannister taking the job, it looked as if, hey, this is a retool. Like, it's going to be slow play. We need you to be ready to compete, but also develop these younger players. But that comment from Doug is like, well, maybe his feet feel a little bit hotter because we've brought in a lot of NHL players, and Doug has made his points very clear. I believe this team can compete with anybody in the Western Conference. You put NHL players on a roster. You don't force the younger players onto the NHL team. and you're expecting this team to compete with the Western Conference, yeah, I could see how the feet get a little bit hotter. Again, it's not like this dude's on the hot seat right now. He just signed a 2-year contract. But if it doesn't go well this year, and then next year starts off slow, that could be a little bit of what looked like in 2011, 2012.
Well, it's not like they have a historically great coach that they brought in during the offseason.
Hey, he's not a coach in waiting, okay?
Drew Bannister with Claude Julien. At least they don't have him in the building.
What's wild about that, though, is Claude was the one, or Drew was the one that brought Claude Julien in.
Yeah. So there's
again,
that.
When he said it, I'm like, whoa.
I don't think this is a you better perform or else situation. But I think it is a you better perform at some point over the next couple of years or else situation.
I think he put the expectation on Bannister with the comment of like, hey, we think we're a playoff team. And if we're not a playoff team, you underperform. In Doug Armstrong's eyes, that's where the feet go to the fire. Because before all of those moves, we all were in agreement. This is still not a playoff team. This was a developed team. But then you go out and get Joseph and Foxa and Suter and Texie and then Holloway and Broberg. Yeah, the feet get a little warmer.
I think he's got 2 years.
I do too. And I think that second year is the one where it's like, you need to show up early.
And I don't think a coincidence that there is a 2-year contract in place for him while there is a 2-year waiting period for Alex Steen to become the general manager.
Yep.
And then at that point in time, they can make a decision on, is this the guy for us long-term, or is this a guy that got us to the point where we can hire the coach that's going to be our long-term answer in place here in St. Louis? None of us can possibly answer that yet because we haven't seen him with this current group of players. But it's something worth monitoring this season. Absolutely. With Alex and Bradford on BK coming up in about 15 minutes. Katie Wu, Cardinals insider for The Athletic, will join us in the final week of the Cardinals season. What are the final few days of this season going to bring, and what is she anticipating from the Cardinals if and when they announce changes coming up in the next week or two? We'll ask Katie about that at 1 o'clock. The Junk Drawer is coming up next year on 101 ESPN.
The NFL is back on ESPN. Tomorrow night, Giants and Cowboys. Pre-game at 6:30, kickoff at 7:15. Your destination for the NFL in St. Louis is 101 ESPN. picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. Let's open it up. The junk drawer with BK and Ferrario.
Brought to you by Fenton Bar and Grill. Best trashed wings in Missouri. Dine in, carry out, 7 days a week.
Have you guys seen the story of what's taking place at UNLV right now? And I'm not talking about what they're potentially going to do with their conference. I'm talking about their quarterback who decided today to basically quit on his team.
No. Sounds like he's a gamer, though.
So UNLV is 3-0 to start out this season. Just had a huge
Good time to quit.
win against Kansas, one of the biggest wins in recent program history.
Against Kansas?
Yep.
Huh. I saw Kansas, and
it was a big win,
they
man.
give up 3 points to Lindenwood, so.
They now no longer have a quarterback because their starter, depending on where you look, there's a lot of different stories that are coming out today.
As you'd expect.
May have decided after that game, hey, the price of business just went up. The cost of doing business with me, it's not what it was prior to the start of that game. Now you got to pay me a little bit more.
Like, you can do this?
I don't know. Depends on who you ask.
Can you hold a football program ransom?
Apparently. Brett McMurphy tweeted late last night, UNLV starting quarterback Matt Sluka announced that he will redshirt and will not play the rest of this season, adding in an Instagram post, quote, I committed to UNLV based on certain representatives that were made to me. Those were not upheld after I enrolled. Despite discussions, it became clear that the commitments would not be fulfilled in the future. I wish my teammates the best of luck this season and hope for continued success of the program. Now, other reports have since come out on what's going on here.
What are some of these incentives that weren't upheld?
The guy that operates UNLV's collective says, and the collective, for those that aren't familiar, is basically the group of individuals that pays these players through NIL funds. The collective never agreed to a $100,000 deal that Sluka is saying that they did agree to previously.
Okay.
They did make a payment of $3,000 to Sluka, and they were discussing a monthly payment of $3,000 to Sluka each of the next few months prior to the end of the regular season, and that was going to be his NIL fund for this year. Well, Sluka's agent said that's not true. That is not how this all went down. We had agreed to something. Apparently, there was nothing in writing.
What are we doing, man? How do you agree to something without it in writing?
Marcus Cromartie, if that name sounds familiar, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, now this is all starting to make sense.
Nothing was signed, but the coaches promised that he would make $100,000 in his time at UNLV during his recruitment. Cromartie, his agent, said the collective may not have agreed to $100,000, but the coaches did. End quote.
But it said he would make that in his time at UNLV. Didn't say he would make it in his first season.
I think this is his last year of eligibility.
Oh, so he has been there. Okay, so it's been a longer time.
So this was his first year. He was in the portal after the last year. He was at Holy Cross, I believe, was his previous place of employment.
Haven't stayed up to date with Sluka.
No,
sorry, guys.
That's fair. I'm actually surprised that this is the first time that we've seen something like this.
Yeah. I mean, the agent kind of sucks for not getting it in writing.
This is a really good lesson to be learned for players that enter the portal. Dude, if it's not written in pen and you do not get a signed, sealed, and delivered agreement between you and the university, assume it's not happening.
Yeah, if you're going down this path of NIL and getting incentives from schools to go there, there needs to be contracts a part of this. This is no longer a handshake agreement.
No. This feels to me like there was a miscommunication that took place, I would say, on both sides. And I absolutely believe that the coaches said, hey, you'll get $100,000.
Yeah.
I absolutely believe that. I also think if you're the player, you don't just go, as you said, Alex, on a handshake agreement of, hey, you're going to make $100,000 here.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll see you soon. Yeah.
Let's do it. Can't wait.
I got this other school who's got a contract that's offering me 80, but you tell me 100. Let's go.
Good luck in the spring, buddy.
Yeah,
that's all I can say.
Is that this will get enough recognition from media and players across the country that they learn from this. Because there's probably a lesson to be learned for a lot of guys around college football that are going to be shopping themselves into the portal this offseason. And my hope is that they will learn a lesson of get that all in writing.
Yep.
Make sure that your agent, and a lot of these guys have agents now, actually does his job. Because it feels to me as if that's really what happened. Is the agent dropped the ball, didn't do what he was supposed to do, and now the kid is the one that's left in a really bad spot. It's tough, too, because, like, I want to say, man, this guy's such a quitter, blah, blah, blah. It's his last year of eligibility. He's not an NFL player. He's never going to be able to play college football again. And if he decided to continue to play out the rest of the year, he has no eligibility remaining. By deciding to step away now, he can have that redshirt season, shop himself in the portal this offseason. He just showed you what he can do against higher level competition. He probably will get $100,000 somewhere. So, Alex, if you had a family member and you were talking to them about what do you tell them to walk away? Do you tell them to stay with the program? What do you do?
I would tell them to walk away. I mean, if you were promised something and you're not receiving that on the other end, why am I going to continue to? Because that's what this has become now. I'm getting paid for my services. And if I'm giving you my services, yeah. And on top of it, you're 3-0 and you're benefiting off of me and you're not giving me what was promised. Now, the tough part is it wasn't in contract. So, like, if I'm this kid's parent, it's probably along the lines of, hey, this is also a tough lesson for you to learn. Like, you should have had this in a contract in writing.
No doubt.
Take this and build off of it moving forward. But, man, it would be hard for me to look at my kid and tell him, who's probably upset about this, like, yeah, I understand you walking away. You were promised something and you're not giving it.
The other big high-profile case that was similar to this was the Florida one, where they had the quarterback that ended up going there, 5-star kid, didn't get what he was promised with NIL. I think there will be more of these in the future. Hopefully, there's a lesson to be learned from some of these kids. With Alex and Bradford on BK. Coming up next, Katie Wu is the Cardinals insider for The Athletic. What is she anticipating in terms of the big picture changes that will take place with the Cardinals this offseason? And what has she learned from some of these young players and what they've been able to do so far in the month of September? We'll ask Katie when she joins us next year on 101 ESPN.
Make your picks for this week's Fastlane Pick'em Challenge at 101ESPN.com. Show off your football knowledge and see if you can top the Fastlane and the dudes from the Rizzuto Show on the point. For this week's top score, it's the Fastlane and the Riz Show throwing down all football season long in the Pick'em Challenge. Enter your picks for this week right now at 101ESPN.com.
Refreshed by Bud Light, official beer sponsor of the NFL. Easy to Sunday, easy to enjoy.
This is wide receiver Luther Burden III. Come support.
WXOS HD1 East St. Louis. 101 ESPN is driven by Auto Centers Nissan, home of the lifetime warranty and 30-day return. We're right back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario and Bradford Bruns. I'm Brandon Kiley. Happy to go out to the 101 ESPN hotline to be joined by the Cardinals insider for The Athletic. She's Katie Wu. She joins us each and every week here on BK and Ferrario. Katie, we appreciate the time as always. How are you enjoying the final week of the Cardinals season?
It's crazy, right? I felt like this year, for the most part, especially in the first half, went by so fast. And as I sit here and we have 5 games left, it really doesn't feel like that long ago we were in Jupiter talking about what the 2024 season could hold. And unfortunately, guys, it ended up holding up disappointment at the end of it. But wow, I'm so thankful to be wrapping up my 4th year on the Cardinals beat. Time flies. It really does.
It does. And now that we're into the month of September, and it looks like the team is probably going to finish with a record above 500. I guess it wasn't completely empty in terms of what they were able to do this year. Katie, September has shown us a little bit, though, from some of these young players. Last night, that was on full display with Jordan Walker, Mason Wynn, Michael McGreevy, Victor Scott. What have you learned about the young players that could be a part of their long-term core down the stretch?
I really liked last night's win. I liked it because of who was involved. I mean, Michael McGreevy comes up there, makes his second career start and his first start in the big league since July, gets Coors Field, no big deal. And, 3 earned runs with 5 innings. Those 2 runs ended up scoring on a weak ground ball as a sinker ball thrower. That's going to happen sometimes. I thought that outing was really encouraging. And what I liked the most about McGreevy was how poised he was the whole time. This is a guy who's not rattled. He has a lot of confidence for a guy who's had 3 major league appearances. And I just thought it was really fun to see him kind of navigate the challenge of Coors and still adjust to the big leagues. Thought he did a great job. I loved the 8th inning rally. I love that it was Jordan Walker coming through with runners in scoring position. I love that it was Victor Scott doing the same right after. And I love the big home run by Mason Wynn, but more importantly, I liked the dagger, if you will, from Mason in the 8th there that capped off that 4-run inning, because the Cardinals just simply haven't had a lot of daggers this year. So for them to definitively put that game away and have a strong start from McGreevy, 3 guys in the future, and Walker, Scott, and Wynn coming through when the team needed it, I thought, hey, this season's probably going to end in a disappointing manner, but there's no reason to not be somewhat excited about 2025 when the kids are doing what they did yesterday.
So how much impact, Katie, on that note, do you take into, okay, these guys ending the season on a positive note, like Jordan Walker, Victor Scott, Mason Wynn, and can they carry that over into the next season? Because in years past, we've seen it in the last month or 2 of the year where they look red hot, and then the start of the next year, you're thinking, well, what happened?
Yeah, off-season work is super important. I'm less worried about Mason. I mean, Mason has been playing through so many aches and pains lately. He's quite literally crawling to the finish line, and you would never be able to tell based on how he plays. So if there's one strong takeaway from this season, it's that Mason Wynn has really solidified himself in this Cardinals organization. Now, it's going to be big off-seasons for Victor Scott, for Jordan Walker, for Nolan Gorman, for Lars Nootbaar, who I still consider a relatively young guy, just even though he's been here a while, because this is going to be the core of the club going forward. We've talked about the pitching a lot. Palante's been good. McGreevy, of course, is someone to keep an eye on. Maybe Zach Thompson can figure some things out. But what this team does in the offseason, what these individual players go do, what they work on, what they don't, is going to be super imperative coming into spring training. I mean, it sounds crazy to talk about spring training when we haven't even finished the 2024 season, but yeah, if you're counting on the kids to be the youth movement, to be the core going forward, what they do in the offseason matters just as much as what they're doing in season right now.
All right, Katie, let's get to the big picture questions that I know a lot of Cardinals fans are wondering about as we enter the final week of the season.
I'm scared.
What are you anticipating? What lies ahead beyond this week for the Cardinals? I'm making this open-ended because I'm curious where you'll go with it.
It's a good question, and I think we're going to have a lot more clarity at the end of the season, and I think we are going to see changes, but I don't know to what degree, and I know that's not helpful. I am hoping to have more answers, before the season ends. But look, I think you take one look at the stadium, and you see what's happened to attendance, and you see what's happened to local support. It's not that Cardinals fans aren't passionate. It's not that Cardinals fans don't care. It's the fact that, something that was once deemed impossible has happened in St. Louis. A baseball town has become apathetic about its baseball team, and that's a problem. And it's not something that's going to be easily fixed over the course of one offseason. You can't just slap a Band-Aid on this roster and say, all right, we'll try again in 2025. Maybe we'll be competitive. I do think there's a chance the Cardinals could be competitive next season. They were, for up until the last 6 weeks of the season, competitive this year. Did it make the majority of the fan base confident in the trajectory of the franchise? No. I would actually argue that it frustrated a lot of fans, because it didn't seem like the organization was really diving deep into the root of the problems. Now, I can't sit here and definitively say what the root of the problems are. I think that's a really loaded question. But clearly, when you look at the Cardinals from where they were in the early 2010s, when they were a powerhouse in baseball and they were like the franchise to emulate, and you look at them now, they've lost their way. And I think, I can't speak for every fan, but I do think fans just want to see some sort of change, some sort of acknowledgement that what this organization is doing, while, yes, they are fielding a competitive, by definition, team, 2023 aside, are they really a strength in baseball? Are they really a team that other teams are fearing? No. So that the Cardinals have lost their identity in that regard has been shocking. I think fans want to see an acknowledgement of that and then a path for change. I don't ever see the Cardinals participating in a full rebuild. That's a luxury. They don't have to. You can upgrade your organization and make changes while still fielding a young, over 500 team and hope you get in. And I think that's what, if the Cardinals decide to do that for the next 2 years, while addressing that they have major fixes in the infrastructure of the organization to address, I think fans would be a lot more comfortable in that route than just another year of, hey, let's overpay for an entire starting rotation, hope that it's enough, block the kids, and maybe we'll sneak into the wild card.
Totally agree with everything you just said there, especially at the end, Katie, about not putting the Band-Aids on a open wound. That being said, my impression from our text line, from social media, and I know that is not always a perfect indicator on what people that are the paying customers are thinking that are going out to the stadium every night, but I think we've seen this at the stadium as well. I think if those changes come and the man that is making the decisions is still John Mozeliak, the response will be pretty similar to what it is right now, which is some of that apathy. Do you get that same feeling from talking to fans, seeing people out of the ballpark, whatever it might be? Can the Cardinals sell this stuff if Mo's the one that's still making the change or making the decisions?
That's such a great question because we see it. I don't see the text line, but the Athletic comments are pretty much the same. The online discourse is pretty anti-John Mozeliak, and I get it. But I don't think it's fair to completely wipe out what he did for the first 15 years of his tenure. I mean, I don't have the stat right off my head, but I think the Cardinals have played less than 20 games out of contention at Busch Stadium since Mo's tenure started in the regular season. I think it's disappointing that his tenure is ultimately going to end with a sour taste, right? But I think that discourse from social media, the text line, the online world, if you will, only speaks to a fraction of the fan base. It happens to be the loudest because it's what we as a sports media entity deal with the most. But fans at the ballpark, I think they just want to go and support their club. And if there's a plan in place where changes are coming, I think they'll do so. This is, St. Louis Cardinals fan base is really smart. And I know we do the whole best fans in baseball bit, but I really do believe that this fan base understands how baseball works as a business and how baseball works as an organization. And I think if they understand that changes are in place, and it's going to take a little bit, but hey, this organization has a plan, they'll follow and they'll support the youth. And they might not love John Mozeliak at the end of it, but I still think they'll show up.
So, Katie, moving over to the coaching staff side, because that feels like another area where we could see changes. How important is it to make changes on the coaching staff following another season missing the playoffs?
So this answer is probably not going to be super popular on the text line. I don't think the Cardinals are making any coaching changes for next season. This is not to say that, they could add some positions, but while they haven't had these full conversations on what 2025 will look like, those historically have always come in the week after the regular season when Mo can sit down with Ollie and the rest of the staff and make those calls. I'd be really shocked if there was a manager opening for 2025. I think Ollie Marmol's here for at least one more season. Part of the reason why he was extended was so that he could oversee a transition period like this. Also, from a transition period overall, we've known that Mo is going to step down after 2025. He said it. It doesn't really make any sense to hire a new manager for one season when whoever takes over for Mo is probably going to want to hire his own staff as well. So I know fans, they want consequences. They want blood, if you will. There should be someone to pay for another season where you miss the playoffs. I get it. I don't think that's coming from the coaching staff. I do think we'll see Ollie and the majority of his staff retained. That's not to say there doesn't need to be changes in maybe on how they do things, but maybe they just add more staff. I don't think we, as, definitely not me, I don't think I've acknowledged this enough. The Cardinals have one of the smallest coaching staffs in baseball and one of the smallest minor league coaching staffs in baseball. Adding positions in the offseason should be a priority for this club, both at the major league and minor league level.
Interesting. As of today, Katie, and this is where we get into speculation, and I know that's hard to do in your role. You're a reporter, so you report what you know. But if I use that as a caveat of this is speculation, so people on the text line, people that are listening that are going to throw this out on Twitter, please know that as the front end. is your anticipation that John Mozeliak will be back as the president of baseball operations for next season, the final year that he's anticipated to do so?
And making all of the decisions.
My speculation is yes. Do I think that there could be a transition period throughout the season? Again, this is just my speculation. I don't know for sure. I could also see that route. I don't think there is a time in 2025 where we see someone besides Mo as the president of baseball operations. It doesn't mean that how the Cardinals do things is going to stay the same. We could see a ton of changes. They've alluded to it before. I mean, there's going to be something at the end of the season where they address these changes in full. So while I can't really definitively say, I would be shocked if Mo is gone in 2025, but I do think they might be changing how they structure the dynamic in the front office.
Katie, we appreciate the time as always. We'll be reading all of your great work over the next week and certainly over the offseason as the Cardinals have some huge decisions to make over at The Athletic, and we'll be following you on Twitter at Katie J. Wu. Thanks so much for joining us each and every week throughout the Cardinals season. We'll talk with you next week as we kind of wrap this all up. Appreciate the time as always.
You got it, guys. See you next week.
That's Katie Wu joining us as she does each and every week here on BK and Ferrario. Alex, I want to react to some of what you just had to say there, especially about John Mozeliak, his future with the Cardinals, and why I believe if he's the one making the changes, I don't think it matters what they do this offseason. I think Cardinals fans are going to have a sour taste about it in their mouth. We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN.
Catch the Balloon Party with Tim McKernan and Action Jackson. Weekdays from 10 to 11 a.m. on 101 ESPN. The fastest hour of sports radio is driven by Munganast and Burkhardt Alton Toyota.
The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely on advertisements.
Passes for this year's Evolution Festival. Happening this Saturday, September 28th and Sunday, September 29th in Forest Park. Featuring an awesome two-day lineup including The Killers, Beck, Billy Idol, and many more. Find all the ticket details and find that chance to win that pair of two-day passes for the Evolution Festival right now, either at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app.
This This is exactly where you want to be, listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Count that big pen.
With Alex Ferrario and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. So if you missed any of our conversation with Katie Woo, Cardinals insider for The Athletic, you can check that out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com. The free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
Alex, in our conversation with Katie, she basically said, and this is speculation, I want to make that clear on the front end, this is not a report. Speculation was her anticipation is that John Mozeliak will be back next year as the lead baseball operations decision maker. Alex, if that is indeed the case, I don't care what the Cardinals do this offseason. I do not think there is a way for them to win over fans. Like, full stop. I think Mo making the decisions, whether this is right or wrong, is such a sour taste in the mouth for Cardinals fans that they don't care what the actual decisions are. It's who's making them. I don't believe in that guy. I don't believe that he's going to have the right decisions to be made to improve this team for 2025 or beyond. I'm not interested in what they're going to do. I think that's where Cardinals fans, for the most part, majority of them, have found themselves as of today. How would you view that if that's the way that they approach this offseason is, hey, there's a transition plan in place, but Mo's still the guy. He's making all the decisions. Coaching staff back. We're going to add to it a little bit, increase our funding for the coaching staff, both at the major league and minor league level, and we're going to make some decisions on these young players. We're going to trade some of them. We're going to keep some, but Mo's the one making all of these choices. How do you think fans would respond to that here in St. Louis?
You're kicking the can down the road. You're waiting until 2025 to actually make some changes. I think if you're a Cardinals fan and Mo is still the one making all of the final decisions, I think you have a good direction of where this team's headed, and it's wait until 2025. It's the Mo line that we all joke about, being patient, because it's going to be all about do the Cardinals do anything in the offseason to add resources to make their minor league systems better, to make sure that there's enough coaching staffs around, like Katie just talked about. If Mo's in charge, there's nothing, in my opinion, that is going to change the expectations of the Cardinals next season for the good, and I think it's going to be all about this team's probably going to be bad next year, and we'll see what 2025 looks like. And I think Cardinals fans, I don't even think they're going to be pissed. It's to the point where it's like, I don't care. I'm done. I'm done until you make some final decisions about this roster moving forward. Because if you're kicking the can down the road to a team that finished one of the bottom 10 in Major League Baseball, and then, sure, maybe you're above 500, but you're still an average team with no improvements on the offensive side, there's no reason to get excited or even talk about the Cardinals in that upcoming offseason.
Man, I don't understand this plan. If this is what they were deciding,
I don't know why you don't adjust when, sure, Mo said he wanted to finish until 2025, and the DeWitts were like, we want you to have however long you want to be for how great you've been. I don't understand why there's not an adjustment when you have two bad seasons.
We've got a lot of text, and the text line is 314-399-9646. That's the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. YouTube chat is off and running today. YouTube.com/101ESPN-STL. It's where the graveyard chat is. From the 618, and this is just one example of many texts that are similar to this. Stadium would say mostly empty unless actual changes are made, and that starts with Mo. I'm not even talking about attendance. No. It's beyond that. Like, this is so inside of the, like, infrastructure of the organization that it goes beyond any one decision, any one indicator in terms of, like, whether or not the fans go to sport. I just think people view Mo right now as the number one problem with the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, some may say, no, it's the DeWitts. Others may say, no, it's Ollie. But Mo is the figurehead of all of that. Mo made the decision to hire Ollie and then to extend Ollie. Mo is the one that has made all of the trades that you may or may not like. Most people probably at this point don't like a lot of the decisions that he's made. Mo is the one that makes the decisions on what the young talent is at the big league level and what the path is for them to get to the big league level, the draft and develop plan, all of this. I think it's just time for a new voice. And sometimes that's necessary, man. Like, Theo Epstein has the 10-year rule.
Mm-hmm.
where he only stays in any individual place for 10 years. And then after that, he says, you know what? It's time for me to go somewhere else. And he does that for a reason. He says, hey, after a certain amount of time, you need a new voice in place. It's just necessary to get fresh ideas, to get new belief systems into the building. And I think Katie's right. You look at the success that Mo had running the baseball operations department, I think it gets underestimated how good of a job he did for about a decade here in St. Louis. But there came a point in time where it was clear to me, and I think for most fans, hey, something's wrong here. And it does not appear to be getting fixed with this individual in charge. Mo might even, if he wanted to, be able to go somewhere else and have success elsewhere if he got into the right situation. I just don't think that situation is here. And with the amount of decisions that need to be made this offseason, Alex, with the roster that are like immediate decisions that have to be made now. What do you do with Ryan Helsley? What do you do with the young talent of trading guys? Who do you end up acquiring that is potentially a star? What do you do with this rotation? What is the development plan in the minor leagues? You can't kick those decisions down the road. What do you do with Goldie? And for them to just say, we're going to have a transition plan in place. No, Mo's the one making the decisions, and you're going to have a guy that's learning on the job. That's what that means. I think this would be a massive mistake by the organization if that's the direction they go.
And that's what I was going to say also. Like Katie said that you don't expect any coaching staff changes in terms of people being let go if Mo is in charge, because you have to wait till the new president of baseball operations takes over to make those changes. Couldn't I say the same thing about making adjustments to your minor league development? Why would the man who's been here for this long be making those changes when the next person that's going to come in is going to make changes how he deems acceptable? So it just seems odd that not only is it not affecting the day-to-day of this team, it's affecting your whole minor league system if you're not making a change. It feels an awful lot like the DeWitts are just, they don't want to run a guy out of town who's done so much for the team, which I understand to some point. But then you go back to when they fired Matheny and DeWitt made the comments of like, we don't operate under missing the playoffs and being average for a consistent basis. And now you're going to be going on 3 years where the expectations is to be 500 or below. It just screams odd to me of how you'd run your organization when things have not gone well. And then on top of all of that, like, I don't know. It just, Mo seems to be spent. Yeah. And if the guy that's running your organization seems spent from doing it, why would you run it back for one more year? Because, well, he's under contract until then. Why not build a succession plan in place to where he's our president of baseball operations, but I'm not making the decisions anymore. We're letting the next guy make the big decisions for this team, and then in 2025, I will not be around.
I'm going to do my classic, not to get political.
We do that on the junk drawer, man. The junk drawer is our political segment.
Sometimes you need fan engagement, fan enthusiasm is kind of like voters in politics. You need to energize
you're really
your base.
Getting there.
And we saw a situation this year where a specific base was not energized by a specific candidate. They decided to make a change. I don't know what's going to happen in November, but I will tell you that their base appears to be a little bit more energized by making the change. The reason I bring that up with respect to John Mozeliak is because the favorability ratings with Mo right now are not high, man. They're really, really low. Lower than they've been at any point in time since I've been here, and I've been here for now basically a decade, Alex, being in St. Louis covering this team day to day. When you have that low of a favorability index, there's only so much that you can do to get people back on board. I don't think there's any individual move that he can make that would be like, oh, okay, yeah, that's the Mo that I remember. Or, oh, okay, I'll give it a shot this offseason. Eventually you need a fresh face. Eventually you need somebody that can bring out, in one scenario, the voters, in the other scenario, fans to the stands, dude. Like, this organization relies on fans getting into that ballpark. And I don't know if firing Mo is the thing that's going to do it. And honestly, I don't think they're going to fire Mo. There's no scenario where that happens. They'll just put him in charge of something on the business side of the operations. And then he's no longer forward-facing. He's not making the business decisions. And I think Mo, there's a chance he's really good at that side of things as well, by the way. But I don't think that you can go into this offseason with him making the baseball decisions and get people excited about Cardinals baseball for 2025. I just don't think there's any scenario in which that happens. So I'm with you. If I was advising the DeWitts, and they would never ask me to do so, but if they did for whatever reason, I would say I think that this is the time where you have to make the switch. And whether that's Chaim Bloom or somebody else, just find the guy that you think is the best for the job and put them in charge of your baseball operations department and let them do that job. And just go all in with that person, ask them what they need, give them the funds that are necessary to make the changes that they need to make, allow them to hire the baseball people that they need, the analytics people that they need, and then let's see what it looks like. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, then you reassess in 3 to 5 years. That's baseball, dude. It's a scary place to be in, and I think this is part of what's leading them to these decisions, Alex. This is a very conservative organization with decision-making. They don't like taking significant risks. And what you have with Mo is you know what he's going to do. You know he will do things that keep you relatively stable for the most part. If you go out there and hire somebody that's a disaster, and they end up being like a Chris Getz, for example, that is just in completely over his head right now and has no idea what he's doing as the White Sox president of baseball operations, you become the laughingstock. This organization doesn't want that, and they have not had that for 25 years. It's scary. But sometimes you got to jump off the cliff and see where you
It's scary because it could go that way. Could also go A.J. Preller's way.
Absolutely.
Where everybody is talking about what a job he has done to turn that or to make that team a successful team.
Or maybe you get Matt Arnold, who's in charge of the Milwaukee Brewers, who got there after David Stearns. And I'm sure it was scary for them as David Stearns walks out of the door. He goes and takes over the Mets, and you're like, oh no, what are we going to do here? Well, you have the number 2 in charge of the Brewers in terms of their president of baseball operations department, and also the number 2 that was there with the bench coach as they lose their manager this past offseason, who everybody thought was an excellent manager. Those guys in Milwaukee continue to have success. They're winning 90-plus games this year. It can work. There is real upside here. You just got to hire the right people, man. And that's what they got to do this offseason. I'm fearful that they will not do that this offseason, though. All right, coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Let's play a game of Better to Forget It here on 101 ESPN.
Coverage of 101 ESPN is presented by Under Law Injury Lawyers. GetJim.com. #101 ESPN. Everywhere you look, that's where we are. On your radio, online, on your mobile device, and in your app store. Search the 101 ESPN app now in the App Store or Google Play. 101 ESPN Sports Center.
Fetty finally back at Coors. I'm Bradford Bruns with your Sports Center update, driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Tonight, Eric Fetty pitches in Denver for the first time since May 3rd, 2022. He donned a Nats jersey then, but now number 12 hopes to deliver St. Louis its fourth straight win. Cardinals-Rockies getting underway shortly after 7:40. Mason Wynn had 4 ribbies as STL claimed yesterday's series opener 7-3. Also this evening, we feature some pucks. Blues Blue Jackets post fast lane, which concludes an hour earlier than usual. Alex Ferrario brings you pregame festivities. Last weekend produced consecutive preseason losses against Dallas plus Utah. This Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
They are St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. Vegas sets them up, and we're here to make the call. It's BK and Ferrario's Bet It or Forget It on 101 ESPN.
Presented by Circus Sports Illinois. Sports betting the way it should be.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Bet It or Forget It. You guys give us a scenario. We will tell you if we are betting it or forgetting it here on BK and Ferrario. Alex, I'll start today. Let's start out with this one. We're in the final week of the regular season in Major League Baseball. Bet it or forget it, boys. A wild card team will once again win the World Series this year.
Ooh, I'm going to bet this because Padres are a wild card team, and right now, they're my favorite.
I'll bet it as well. I mean, you wouldn't take another team in the second half of this season, right? Who's going into the playoffs any hotter than San Diego, for that matter?
I would always take the field whenever there's a this team versus the field. And it's worth noting, San Diego's still alive for the NL West. Only 2 games back right now of the Dodgers. They beat them last night. They've got 2 more games over the next couple of days. It's a big-time series right there, boys. If San Diego sweeps that series, they are very much in play for the National League West crown. And potentially the number 1 overall seed, interestingly enough, in the National League.
Mike Schilt just doing Schilt things. Scratching and clawing his way to the top of the National League. Don't try and act like you guys are friends.
No, I didn't say that. I have always said I think he's a good manager. I don't think it was going to work here.
You just don't agree with a lot of his decisions on the field.
Well, I thought he had some bullpen issues at times, but other than that, I thought he was a good manager. He's a good manager. I would say bet this, but it's not just because of the Padres. Yeah. I think you look over in the American League, nobody is hotter right now than the Detroit Tigers, guys.
Yeah,
they have been fantastic. They have a legit number 1 starter. They traded a bunch of dudes at the deadline.
Yeah,
they're still going on this run. San Diego's another option. I think Arizona has a real chance to be able to win the World Series this year. Baltimore is in that realm as well. And, man, they've had a weird second half of the season, but they're also an option. So I'll say bet it. I do think it will be a wild card team once again this year. Yeah. What do you got, Alex?
Fellas, bet it or forget it. The Blues win a playoff round before the Cardinals make the playoffs.
Bet it.
I was going to get really bold and say the Blues make it to the Western Conference Final.
Ooh, hey now.
Before the Cardinals, but I didn't think that one was going to fly.
I'll bet it as well. You have more than an ample opportunity to do some damage this coming season. And when you get to the postseason, again, when you have that opportunity to unleash Jordan Binnington, to me, he is still a prime performer. Our goaltender, it's a well-known axiom at this point, can steal you a series, can certainly get you to that second round. I saw the look there, BK. You know it's true. Bet it.
I'm telling you, man, it's just every time he uses a word, I'm like, okay, hold on. I got a dictionary of this right now.
It's a well-known axiom. Never heard that describing
what is
a goaltender in the NHL.
What metaphor, analogy? It didn't fit as well. It didn't fit.
I even spelled axiom wrong. Jesus. Talk about feeling dumb.
5 letters. 5 letters. Quite simple. All right, guys. The death of Texas and the Astros winning the AL West. Things that are very typical and that we can expect. Jason Hayward, of all people, actually helped Houston clinch as much last night. So bet it or forget it. Houston is a lock to advance to its 8th straight ALCS.
Man, what a ridiculous run they've been on.
Oof. The pitching this year, though, I don't know.
I would say bet it. I think their top 2 guys are still really freaking good. And I just think the American League kind of stinks this year.
I do, too.
I understand Judge and Soto are amazing.
Yeah, but their pitching stinks. Nestor Cortez is down for injuries now.
They've got real issues with their pitching, and the rest of their lineup isn't particularly imposing. Yeah. Baltimore's been terrible in the second half of the season. Cleveland's been good. They've got a real chance, but they're the bizarro Cleveland Guardians this year, and that normally it's a bunch of pitching and no offense, and now suddenly it's a bunch of offense with no pitching. The Royals have, whoo boy, yikes, rough finish for their season. Thank God they won last night. Yeah, I'm going to say bet it. Yeah. I think that the Astros are a lock to get to another ALCS.
I never doubt a team that has people who know how to win and get to that level, and Houston is just chock full of a roster that knows how to do it, unlike the other teams in the American League.
And granted, in the rotation, you have had a couple of guys ascend out of necessity, Brown as well as Arrighetti, because this year you've received nothing from Verlander. It seems as if that time has passed. But when you have those stalwarts in the lineup, obviously Alvarez, Altuve, etc., Tucker being back in there now, can't bet against them, really.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. We'll get to a few of these from the text line for Bet It or Forget It. From the 636, Bet It or Forget It, the attendance for the Cardinals next year will be lower than it was this year.
Bet it.
I agree.
If you don't make any changes,
yep. Even if you do make changes, the attendance is typically a lagging indicator. So you'll see, the attendance for next year will in part be based upon the results from this year. If a team wins the World Series, it's typically not in the season that they were great for the first time that you see the attendance jump. It's the year after. The Cardinals have seen this. 04, the attendance was a little lower, but 05, when they went to the World Series, they had the attendance spike the next year, and that's where you really saw it. Same thing was true coming off of 2011 as well. You see the attendance come up the year after, and it's the inverse coming off of the really, really bad season. So I think next year the attendance will once again go down. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Guys, bet it or forget it. Missouri finishes the year at least 10-2 this season.
I'll bet that. At least 10-2? Absolutely.
Dude, Mizzou fans are panicking right now.
I mean, I understand the panic. It didn't look good against Vanderbilt. I need to see a string of Vanderbilts before I'd start to be concerned.
RELAX. Relax.
RESPTC. Find out what it means to me.
PK, we mentioned it before the show even started back in the office. If you have a couple of those deep throws hit, in essence, you're basically at the exact same offensive point you were at this time last year. Nobody else outside of Alabama scares me in the conference. Oklahoma could be irrelevant next month. 10-2, bank it.
Yeah. Man, now the YouTube chat is just bringing up different words that we're saying and trying to explain them. Somebody said, hey, Alex, ascend means to rise through the air. Guys, I'm not that bad. Well, just some words, okay? Like axiom.
6 letters on that one.
They're coming up with different words that somebody says.
Alex is over here doing syllables. Axi.
I used a U instead of an O. I thought it was you. I pronounced it like it sounded, all right?
Dude, as I look at this schedule, if they don't go 10-2, something has gone horribly awry. Texas A&M struggled to beat what I think is probably a pretty good Bowling Green team, but they lost to Notre Dame. I think we all can see now Notre Dame's not very good this year.
Terrible.
Oklahoma just went to a true freshman quarterback. They've made that change. Tulane, they put up big numbers against Tulane. I now know Tulane's defense is one of the worst in all of college football after watching them against Louisiana. Don't call me Lafayette Ragin' Cajuns last week. Oklahoma still has to play Texas, Ole Miss, Missouri, Alabama, and LSU.
Everybody.
It's rough for them, man. And those are 2 of your 3 hardest games on the schedule right now. The other, of course, being Alabama, which, that's going to be really tough. You're going on the road at Alabama.
Still not bought in on Alabama, too, though, so.
Who else is sneaky in the second half? Maybe South Carolina and the other Columbia, maybe. That's a big if. Otherwise, Arkansas. I'm not seeing it. Arkansas could be.
Arkansas is interesting. I don't know that they're good, but I think they have a quarterback that can make some plays. He's tough to bring down, but he also will throw it to the other team 3 times a game, and it's a matter of if you catch those 3 passes or not. Those would be the 2 teams that I think are a little sneaky.
But you are at home for the latter one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. On the road at South Carolina. That is the real rivalry for Missouri. Missouri, South Carolina is the one that you really have in the SEC so far.
Agreed.
And going there is never an easy thing. All right, coming up next, let's get into the BK and Ferrario Rewind here on 101 ESPN.
Tonight, the Blues are back on ESPN with preseason play.
Shoots, he scores!
Blues Blues and Blue Jackets. Pre-game at 5, puck drop at 6.
The wait is over.
Your exclusive home for Blues hockey is 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you and with my insurance agent, Tracy Bibb, her and her team at Allstate, taking care of you with your insurance coverage. And Tracy, as we enter the fall, it starts to get a lot more windy. And I had this happen to me last year where a big old tree branch fell right on top of our shed and had to figure all of that out. So this is why people need to make sure their insurance is ready to go.
Yeah, or we get remnants of hurricanes that are moving through the Gulf, and then they come up this way and they wreak havoc. So absolutely a perfect time to check your insurance, especially if you've already been with a company that you have found out that you have a 1% or maybe a 2% wind hail deductible. We do not do that at Allstate. We can get you as low as a $500 deductible or a $1,000 deductible. And don't be afraid. If you've had a claim before and you're afraid that you're not going to be able to get insurance with us because you've had a claim, that's okay. We can look at that, and it's not going to hurt you. And if you've replaced your roof recently, which a lot of people have, we have dynamite rates, and it's worth giving us a call.
Call her today. Tell Tracy you heard it here on 101 ESPN, and she will walk you through her entire coverage. Free, non-committal quote, super simple. 314-328-4260. Again, that's 314-328-4260. It's no fib. You're always in great hands with the Bib. Tracy, thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Go Blues.
Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. Let's run it back with the Daily Rewind on BK and Ferrario. Brought to you by Gloria Lou, your home sold guaranteed realty. Selling your home begins at GloriaHasTheBuyers.com.
If you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check out the podcast page, 101ESPN.com. The free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
If you go over there after the show today, you'll see our interview with Chris Kerber and Katie Woo. Kerb's, of course, the voice of the Blues. Talk to him a little bit about what the Blues are going to do down the middle at center this year. Talk to Katie Woo about what she anticipates the Cardinals doing with the front office, what the next week of decisions are going to be for the team. You can find all of that, again, over on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com. Free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find our podcasts. Alex, I am curious. We talked today in the Open about Michael McGreevy and how he's earned the opportunity to be in the Cardinals rotation starting on opening day of next year. Not as the opening day starter.
No, yeah,
being
day
in
one.
The rotation.
No.
One of the five, right?
Yeah, he should be.
Andre Palante also has earned his right to be in the rotation going into next year. Again, not as the opening day starter.
Well, he probably, I could argue it for.
But one of the five. You also have Quinn Matthews, who yesterday was announced as the Baseball America Minor League Pitcher of the Year, not just for the Cardinals organization, but for all of minor league baseball. He was the best pitcher in their eyes in the minor league system this year. That's 3 starters that the Cardinals may have drafted and developed internally when this team has struggled to draft and develop for years when it comes to starting pitching.
Yeah.
Is there a scenario? I know this seems far-fetched right now because of how terrible the last couple of seasons have felt, but is there a scenario 5 years from now where you look back on the 2024 season and say to yourself, you know what, that was actually the year that they laid the foundation for what was a pretty good rotation over the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think I could see that because you're starting to get a clearer picture of what the formation of a rotation could be for you because you've got your back-end stalwart like an Andre Palante who, I mean, it seems like just the way he's pitched this season longevity-wise, you can expect him to be out there every 5th day for you and stay competitive. I guess I just still don't know what the top end of your rotation looks like because we talked about it. Like Quinn Hughes, at best, we're talking about maybe a 2, but I don't even know if that's what he reaches. Probably more along.
3.
Yeah. So you're probably still, not probably, you're still in search of that number 1. But if you could build everything else out and all you're doing is going into the offseason saying, hey, we got to go find a number 1 pitcher, that's a success in my book. And if you're going to formulate your roster that way for your pitching, yeah, absolutely. I could say that 4 years from now.
I think the tough part is, and why, if you're skeptical, I can understand it, because I felt the same way about the offense last year. I felt like last year was the year that you laid the foundation for the offense to be really good over the next 5 years, and you look at it and you're like, oh, man, 2023 was the year where we should have seen it coming. You have Jordan Walker, you have Nolan Gorman, Brendan Donovan, Lars Nootbaar, Von Herrera is coming. You had all of these different individual, Mason Wynn, you had all of these individual pieces, and Thomas Jaycee on the way. This could be really good over the next 3 to 5 years. And then you get literally 1 year later, and out of the 6 or 7 names that I just mentioned, you feel good about maybe 3 of them right now. And so I only mentioned 3 starting pitchers. It's entirely possible we get to this point next year, and one of them's hurt because pitching breaks. One of them disappointed. Maybe it's McGreevy or Quinn Matthews. They just aren't able to repeat their performance from this year. And then one of them is like pretty good, but it's like a number 4 or 5 starter. And you look back and you say, man, we had 1 starter that ended up coming out of the 3 that we thought were going to be really good for us. That's the concern.
That's why you need to fix your decision makers right now and not wait a whole nother year before you do that, because the people that are making decisions should be making decisions from top to bottom in terms of the development, so you can progress 1 extra year with Quinn Matthews and McGreevy and with Andre Palante. But if you kick the can down the road and say, well, we'll make all those big decisions in 2025, well, then, yeah, you're putting yourself in a bad spot.
They have some real reasons for optimism. Like, the Cardinals are not in a scenario like the Chicago White Sox are right now, or some of these other bottom dwellers in Major League Baseball. Hell, they're not even in as bad of a situation right now, in my opinion, as the Toronto Blue Jays, where they are stuck, dude. They've won 73 games this year. They have 1 year left of Vlad Guerrero Jr. Like, this version of the baby Blue Jays has failed spectacularly, worse even than what the Cardinals have with Goldie and Arenado. I don't think they're completely stuck, this organization right now, stuck. And they've got reasons for optimism, both on the hitting side of things and pitching. But this is the offseason where you have to cycle through all of those guys, filter through them, and decide, okay, here's our core. Here are the 5 players, position player-wise, that we're building around, that we really believe in, and we've got to extract the most value possible from them. And here are the 3 or 4 starting pitchers that we really believe in within our system, both at the big league level right now and that are coming up. And we're gonna build around them. And here's what we're gonna do with some of our old, overpriced veterans, and we're going to move on from some of this money. This is the offseason when all of that stuff needs to happen. So you add it all up, and it's like, man, next week could be the defining moment where we get to find out, are they actually going to be able to do this? Can they capitalize on what is a really intriguing offseason for them to go out and make the big move, where they can finally bring in a young star talent that is in his prime with some of the extra talent that they've assembled? They've got a surplus in their position player system right now.
The one thing I would say, and
it's Mo, I think people would say no.
Yeah, well, my warning shot with all of that would be take everything you hear with a grain of salt whenever that first press conference is, because the Cardinals have a tendency of saying things and not backing them up, at least over these last couple of years. This offseason is going to be a whole lot of prove it to me. To where if they do say, like, yeah, there's going to be changes throughout our system, there are going to be more hires, we do want to stay aggressive next year. This is going to be a whole lot of prove it rather than sit there and talk it. And I think the Cardinals are just in that position right now.
What is there a way to, quote unquote, win the press conference without announcing next week that Mo is stepping down? I think taking a new role.
Yeah, I think if you were talking about winning over the fan base, it would be, Mo saying, I will not be making any of the final decisions roster related. That will be Chaim Bloom. I think that's the only way you win the press conference.
There's no other way. There's no way for Mo to say, hey, there's a transition plan in place.
I don't think so.
Chaim Bloom is going to be taking over, and by the end of next season, he will be the one that's making the decisions.
I don't think that makes Cardinals fans happy, because that's kicking the can down the road one more year when you've been bad for 2 years. I think you're just kicking it down the road. And then if you don't follow it up with any moves to signify that, hey, we got a transition plan in place, meaning trading away Ryan Helsley and bringing in younger players, promoting younger guys to the major league level, keeping guys in specific spots and not moving them up and down through AAA. Unless you do that, which, again, it's all about prove it rather than your words trying to win a press conference.
5 more games. 5 more games until the Cardinals reach the end of this season. They've got to win at least 2 of them the rest of the way to finish above 500 this season and to avoid going under 500 for the first time in 50 years in consecutive seasons. So it looks like they're going to be able to accomplish that. They don't have to worry about that headline being in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. They're going to finish above 500. But it's really the offseason decisions that will take the front stage. With Alex Ferrario and Bradford Bruns, I'm Brandon Kiley. It sounds like Tanner Hendrickson is going to be back in with us tomorrow, so we will talk to you guys with our full show tomorrow at 11 a.m. Great job by Bradford the last couple of days filling in for T-Bone. We'll talk to you then. The Fast Lane's coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
Each week this season, the Rizzuto Show and the Fast Lane are battling out in the Pick'em Challenge, but sometimes we get together and just hang out and watch some football. Hook up with me and learn next Thursday from 6:30 to 8:30 at Helen Fitzgerald's. Again, that's next Thursday. We'll be there watching football. We'll be hanging out, having a great time, enjoying a couple of cold Bud Lights. We'll be at Helen Fitzgerald's on Lindbergh in Sunset Hills. Come out, enjoy yourself, have a great time. Again, that is at Helen Fitzgerald's next Thursday, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m.